America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves. Abraham Lincoln.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
Hello, MacPack. It's great to be back with you for another episode of our program. This is episode 135 of On the Move with Mac Worley. I, of course, am your host, Mac Worley III. This is a show where we attempt to inspire people to stand up for their rights. And I figured today it would be important to kind of go backwards a little bit. We've been going off into different tangents, and I want to go back to the basics today. That is why today's episode is titled Back to Basics, Natural Rights. I want to talk about what these rights are. Let's break them down. Let's talk about each right and why it's important. Let's actually make the case for it. I know this is something that most of you already know, but this will reaffirm many of your beliefs that you have and maybe arm you with some arguments that you otherwise may have not considered. And, you know, at times, my friend Mark, he's going to be on the show. We're going to be talking here, and I'm going to have him make the case, and maybe sometimes I'll play devil's advocate and you know, make the counter argument against these freedoms. And, you know, we'll see what happens. I think this is going to be an interesting show. And again, this show, the reason why we do this show is essentially it's a critical thought laboratory, essentially a school of thought, or if you will, a thought dojo. You know, there's no crying in this dojo, by the way. So we are here to talk about things philosophically and kind of hash it out and basically educate our not just our people who are listening, but ourselves. You know, I'm not married to any position as long as I can see evidence that can prove to me that another position equates more liberty, or if my position is violating someone's rights, or something along those lines. You know, so new information is always good, and how you get that is by, first of all, going out and engaging sources like books, you know, reading a thing or two, but also you get that from talking to people who will challenge your positions. This is one of the reasons why I really like talking to my good friend Mark, who I'm now bringing on the show. Mark is a left-leaning libertarian. I am a right-leaning libertarian. I call myself essentially a conservatarian. And you know, Mark, he's a communitarian or something like that. Is that right, Mark?
Yes, Sensei. No, I don't know what do you mean a communitarian?
You know, part communist,
too close
part
to like
libertarian.
A pinko.
Yeah.
No. I'm a pinko. No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
But I do think I lean a little bit more left when it comes to, I guess, more state and local issues. In addition to that, I consider Hillary to be a much more viable candidate than Donald Trump, so I think that automatically pushes me a little bit more to the left. But then again, we can debate that in the second hour.
Yeah. So we're definitely going to be talking about that. And by the way, for those of you out there, our featured topics today are going to be what are natural rights and why are they important. I want to talk about why do governments exist in the first place, and then I want to actually talk about the states convention here, the Convention of States. Basically, Article 5 of the Constitution gives us the ability to amend the Constitution through a Convention of States. This is bypassing Congress's ability, and you know, I've had my concerns about it, and right now, you know, I've been really concerned because, you know, we can't even agree on a candidate. There are so many of us in the GOP side that don't like Donald Trump, and I feel like the party is incredibly split. So I want to kind of talk about that. Could it actually work? Could a state convention work? I've got a little bit more info than I had before, and, you know, as I say, if you have more info, you can adjust your position accordingly if you were wrong.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. And you know, I may have been wrong. I may have been wrong about it not working right now and the potential for it to be hijacked by the left. So we'll talk about that. Then I want to go into the United Nations meeting in New York that happened this last week. Furthermore, I want to go ahead and have Dan Sandini. He's going to be joining us for the second hour. We're going to talk about the upcoming presidential debate on Monday. Really looking forward to seeing that, and also talking with Dan about what he expects, and hearing Mark and Dan kind of hash it out because they have major disagreements. So, also in the last hour of the show, I want to define conservatarianism. No one has really been talking about this. And look, the way I look at it, conservatives and libertarians are natural allies, and I'm going to talk about why, and why I don't think that there is a ideological divide on this, and why these two could come together in like the kind of ideology that I have. So I'm going to define what I believe, and Mark and I, we can hash this out and stuff as well. So anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about. If you have anything you would like to add today's show, you have anything on your mind, give us a call. The number of the show is 360-450-5625. Again, that's 360-450-5625. Also, I would be remiss if I did not mention the fact that we were recently added to a new network. It's youthrevolt.org. Again, youthrevolt.org. Please check them out. Lots of good shows over there. You should. I've been listening to the Jason Veely show over there, by the way. Pretty good stuff. I highly recommend you guys check out his program. So anyway, Mark, how you doing, man?
Yes, I'm happy. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So let me see here. I want to talk about just kind of this week, and a lot really happened this week. We had the UN meeting. It comes off the heels of us being bombed in New York and the Minnesota stabbing, and then there was police shootings and riots. What are your thoughts on this week? I mean, how are you feeling right now?
America is going to hell. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, it's a little scary of times that we're living in right now, but I think we've always lived in scary times. It's just how we persevere. What do we do about it, and how do we not sacrifice our liberties in order to maintain or gain a little bit of temporary security? So I think that's it's an old quote from Benjamin Franklin. I'm sure you've used it multiple times on your show, but it's the type of thing that needs to be rehashed and resaid. Sure, things are dangerous out there, but we can't be quarantined. We can't be, our rights can't be shut off simply because of the fact that things are getting scary, things are getting dangerous, because, government will use that as a tool, and, who knows, there could be corruption in it where they even start those types of problems. Who knows? So I throw this out to all of your listeners. This is not some time to start to say we need more, government's protection here. We need, more understanding about what the heck's going on with people, especially when it comes to the police and when it comes to how the black community and how a lot of our athletes are responding to this. And there's as most people know, the truth lies somewhere in between. Just as not all blacks are criminals, not all cops are bad, but there's a lot of those situations going on right now. And I think we need to really start to open our eyes and listen a lot more to what people are saying out there before we just rush to judgment. You've been really good with that. Get all the facts first before you make a judgment. But yeah, I mean, a bombing here and there, a stabbing, a couple of shootings, and my oh my. And then when it comes to the bombing over in Syria, it just seems like this could be the absolute strangest year that we've had, at least a century of it, maybe in the past, 50 years. I mean, this is a pretty crazy year, let me tell you.
Yeah, this century is really off to a crazy start. I mean, we had 9/11 entering us into the Iraq War, Operation Enduring Freedom. We go into Afghanistan. We start toppling dictators in the Middle East left and right. It's really
Michael Jackson died.
Oh,
Prince died.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No. I mean, that's true. You just reminded me. Made me a little sad. Thanks for.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you mention my parents' divorce when I was a kid, Mark? Maybe.
Pour some salt on that wound and reopen it there.
Jeez.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So, yes. So, by the way, for those of you out there, the quote you were referring to on Benjamin Franklin, he said, "Any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both." Because, first of all, the government can't protect you, so you're not going to gain any security. And the government really has no incentive to protect you. So when you sacrifice your liberty, you'll end up losing that liberty, obviously, and liberty lost is really, really difficult to gain back. And you probably won't be any safer in the long run anyway. So ultimately...
Think about that before you vote for Donald Trump. Just say that.
Think about that before you vote, period. Please.
Yep,
you should always be thinking about
That's very true.
So one of the things, before we kind of cut off to our break and really dive into these featured topics, Mark, one of the topics that you and I disagree on is revolution. You seem to be a fan of the idea of revolution. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No. I'm definitely for a peaceful revolution, but I think we need when you're talking about back to basics, it's revolving. I want to revolve back to what we had so that we can evolve again. And if we revolve back to the Constitution, there's nothing short of a revolution that's going to kick that into gear. And, when you're talking about
a bloody revolution? Like fighting violence, that kind of thing?
Well, here's the thing. One of the things that was so in common when it comes to the Tea Party Revolution and the Occupy Wall Street Revolution, and I do call both of those an attempt at revolution, is that both sides, while they would never admit that they would agree with one another on anything, they agreed there was a tremendous union between the two, which basically said big companies buying off big government is killing our rights. And while, the solutions on either side might have been completely different, that is something that needs to be spoken about, because the moment these sides tried to do what it is that they were trying to do, they were called out and lambasted by the media on the right. They were simply called racists, and the moment that you throw the racist word out there, your movement's dead. If you're labeled a racist, and all they did was show a couple of pictures of some pretty bad signs that were thrown up there. And I admit those were pretty racist. But for the most part, it was a pretty peaceful movement.
I think it's kind of interesting, though. You said the moment you're called a racist, your movement's dead. If that was the case, Donald Trump wouldn't be, neck and neck right now with Hillary Clinton.
Actually, I stand corrected. You're absolutely right, which is where I'm befuddled and just absolutely baffled at how far this man is going. Actually, I'm ashamed for my country at how far this is going. But I won't go that far down that rabbit hole yet. I think on the opposite side, when the Occupy movement was labeled a bunch of socialists who just, you didn't want to work, you didn't want to pay your student loan bills, and so you just want to sit in and protest, that was a dead movement. And really, it saddened me, because I think the same type of thing when I see the Black Lives Matter movement. And while there is a lot more violence in that particular movement, it's based on a lot more of an urgency that they see, or, as far as violence is concerned, violence should not beget more violence begets more violence. And it's a sad situation, but I see another revolution there that is trying to occur. And, even on your show, you've called them terrorists, which, to some degree, I would agree. But for the most part, I don't think the movement is a terrorist movement. We need to start listening, like I said. We need to start seeing these organizations, but we need to start seeing these for what they are.
I am definitely listening to them. They're anti-capitalist, anti-free market. Black Lives Matter. The organization itself, calls for the destruction of the capitalist way of life, literally, calling for reparations, calling for massive redistribution of wealth programs, things like that, in addition to the fact that they're, very similar to a terrorist organization, not centrally led, broken up into essentially cell networks of local Black Lives Matter organizations who are led by some of the most vile and despicable people on the planet, calling for violence against white people and police, and the lynching of white people. These people they're absolutely domestic terrorists, without a doubt.
When you say they are, this is where I get a little bit troubled, because I don't agree with you when you say they are, because it's not centrally led. It's in communities. These things take a life of their own.
Yeah, and the local leaders are the most radical of them all, especially the ones down there in Portland, which I've had the disservice of running into a few times, and I've got several videos of them giving their speeches at things like May Day, by the way, talking about the destruction of capitalism and how this kind of redistribution of wealth system that needs to happen through reparations and things like that in order for things to be fair and equal. And this has gone even a step further since I've been there, since Black Lives Matter has really hit the scene. But I'm not saying every single person in Black Lives Matter is a domestic terrorist. What I am saying is that there are people inside this movement that are, first of all, opportunistic and using it for an opportunity to, loot their own neighborhood or commit violent acts against other people. And there are others inside those groups who are leading them and inciting those actions. So,
yes, and just as this happened in the Tea Party movement, where you had a bunch of crazy
hold on.
whack-nuts.
We got to pump that brake real fast. There is absolutely no comparison whatsoever between the Tea Party and Black Lives Matter. There are riots happening in the streets. CNN reporters are getting knocked down, assaulted, and they're still referring to this as mostly peaceful protests. If this happened,
and I would agree
that level, though,
out of control.
The Tea Party, if the Tea Party did anything at all, they were instantly scapegoated. They were instantly demonized, and there's absolutely no comparison whatsoever to what Black Lives Matter is doing in the Tea Party. Absolutely.
But see, that's where when you said you have to put the lid on it really fast is where I think that this is where it's being taken into something where it's just like, nope, not even going to listen anymore. This is what I've seen, and this is where it's done. And this is where I strongly disagree with you on this, Mac, is that...
So what did the Tea Party do?
There are... What I'm saying is that the comparison is that it was intended, the original intention behind Black Lives Matter, behind the Tea Party movement, behind the Occupy movement, was peace. What it was trying to get out a message that people are fed up, that they're sick of something, and that things need to change. And so they revolted. Now, the tactics I disagree with, but the message and what the origin, its genesis, is what we need to be a lot more aware of, because it could go back to that. We could revolve back to that, hence revolution, and we could start to see, wait a minute, maybe, just maybe, they had a point at the beginning, and because of the fact that you have some whack-nuts out there who are destroying not only the movement, but their communities, sure, I will not, beyond a doubt, say that either the Occupy movement or the Tea Party movement were remotely as violent as the Black Lives Matter movement. I will give you that. But what my point is that the nature of those initial movements of Occupy and Tea Party are talking about something completely different, which is not what the Black Lives Matter movement is talking about, which is, since the inception of this country, basically, the one race that has been looked upon as something that is insignificant or that is less than substandard, subhuman, in fact, is the black community. And for the entire time, not only were you talking about slavery, which is the most egregious thing that this country has ever done to its own people, then you're talking about how and why the civil rights movement became, because of Jim Crow laws, and then police abuse. And police abuse has not stopped, as we've seen even just this week. And I'm not saying every single fact has come out, and yes, we need to know all of the facts before we determine the gist of the case. But what I'm saying here is that there is an inherent level of racism that is going on in communities that we can't possibly know if we're not black. And yet there are solutions to this that aren't violence, but that could be called a revolution, which is the reason why I'm definitely in favor of the original message of Black Lives Matter, but certainly not its tactics.
Are you a moral relativist?
I don't even know what that means.
Moral relativism is, you can't judge a society or community or even a person if you're not part of that community, society, or if you're not that person either, because
no.
Okay, what you're doing is you're making the moral relativist argument is we can't know what it's like if we're not black. We're not supposed to have an opinion if we're not black. If, for example, I'm white, I'm not supposed to have an opinion. I can't judge them.
I ask people, I get you, but I ask people, what's your point? You know what I mean? When it comes to, you can't know unless you're this. So what I'm saying here is that, and I'm agreeing with you on that. You know, what's the point? Who cares if whether or not I can't know? It's the solution to it. It's like, it shouldn't be a dead argument simply because of the fact that we as white people don't know what it's like to be black. But we need to start to dig into that. So I'm agreeing with you on that.
I'm not saying that we can't. First of all, let's backtrack just 1 second. I think the facts do matter.
Back up the truck.
Yeah. I think that facts do matter, and I think statistics do play a role in laying out what the facts are. And the facts currently are more white people in numbers. No, we're not talking about per capita, obviously. In numbers, more white people are killed by police every year. Per capita, more black people are killed. That means every 100,000 people, every 100,000 black people, there are more people that are killed in the black community than any other demographic.
By double.
What was that?
By double.
And again, I would argue a lot of that has to do with the fact that they have the highest, by far, violent crime rate per capita, 8 to 10 times higher than whites and Hispanics combined. And they've committed 52% of all homicides for the past 30 years, even though they only comprise only 13% of the population. So, again, these groups, where I see a big difference, because from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Tea Party, it wasn't about big corporations or anything. The Tea Party was about federal power. It was frustration from federal power being imposed on the states and overextending to places where they have no business being, and people were feeling overtaxed and underrepresented. And this is the issue. Now, again, I think that these movements, even Occupy is massively different than the Tea Party, in that they're not even identifying the same problems as what I heard from you. I believe you said they're basically identifying the same thing. They just have different solutions. The Occupy movement, that wasn't even anything about federal overreach or the overextension of the federal government and states' rights or anything like that, being overtaxed. It was about banks being in collusion with companies, and again, some of those
corporatism. No, banks being in collusion with government.
But it wasn't even just that. It was a condemnation on capitalism itself, and they're looking at corporatism, crony capitalism, as being capitalism, which is not. That's not.
They're
the same
mixing
thing.
it up. Exactly. You're 100% correct. That's correct. But the challenge that I have, and this is what I throw out as well, is that the Tea Party actually started with Ron Paul, and it was in a protest against the war and against the bailout of the banks. And this is in 07 and in 08. And when I led that movement in 09 in Washington County in Oregon, it was an extremely peaceful, but yet there was the undertones here were all about the government overreach. It was about the fact that, when you're talking about too big to fail, when you're talking about how the fact that we are spending massive amounts of money. And when Obama got into office, the first year, there was $1 trillion deficit. And now, while I blame a tremendous amount of that on the Bush administration and that Congress prior to that, because of the wars, Obama signed it with his pen. So my point is that those two presidents have tacked on $17 trillion onto our debt. Not to mention the interest that it's going to cost us, because now you're looking at, probably for every $2, every about $4, you're talking about another $1 in interest that you're going to have to start to pay. And so what we're talking about here is an insurmountable debt, and it's being built on the fact that government is being bought out by big corporations, and they are basically, more specifically banks and other financial institutions. And when you're dealing with, comes to something like that, I don't see how there's much of a difference between what the Tea Party and what the Occupy movement were saying. Big companies buying out big government and squeezing out the little guy, so your rights are being screwed over. And sure, the Occupy movement was saying, God, we're spending all these trillions of dollars overseas, bombing the shit out of, bombing these other people, and yet we can't pay these other, we can't even spend some of that money when it comes to our own education. We have saddled trillions of dollars in debt and student loans and all of the other ancillary debt that comes around with it, when they're looking at it on the opposite side going, wouldn't that be better spent over here with education than over there with military? And as a libertarian, I'm saying it shouldn't be on either on the federal level, but I definitely see their point.
So we'll come back to this in a moment here. I want to actually talk for a second, since you went ahead and made this show explicit by saying the S word.
I'm sorry.
We'll go ahead and play a clip that I've been wanting to play anyway. I believe it has some cursing in it, and this is just an example of some of the things that Black Lives Matter is actually calling for in rhetoric. So here's the clip. These are leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement calling for the execution of whites and cops. Here we go.
Until the police ain't there no more, and that's what we should act. When them motherfuckers are by themselves, that's when we should start fucking them up, like they do us. When there's a bunch of them niggas taking one of us out, that's how we should roll up. Since we already roll up in gangs anyway, probably will be 6 or 7 black motherfuckers see that white person and lynch their ass. Let's turn the tables. I think if we start turning tables and cops start losing people, this will be a whole different story. Yeah. Because then it will be a state of emergency, and there's either two things going to happen: either we're going to have a big-ass arms war, or niggas are going to start backing up. And we're already getting killed out here, so what the fuck we got to lose?
So, Mark, just curious what you have to say about that. I mean, these are leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement calling for people to kill white people and police. And I believe later on in this, they actually talk about lynching white people. Again, these are self-described. Again, as I said...
You want to know what I think about that?
Yeah, go for it.
And now that it's explicit, it's fucked up, all right? I get it. It's totally fucked up. The problem with it is that the majority of the people who are in this movement are not interested in doing that. The majority of the people in this movement, I can clearly say that. And while I haven't counted up the number and then put it on one side over the other, what I can say is that they're fed up with the idea and with the fact of what they see over and over again every single day is a mistreatment of their community.
Are you familiar with the term, the Marxist term, by the way, a useful idiot?
I mean, I'm familiar with the term, but how are you extrapolating it to this?
Okay, well, the leaders of this movement are the ones calling for these things. The vast majority of people in this movement aren't calling for these, but they're being used by the leaders of this movement to push towards these radical ends. Now, look, I am just calling it like I see it. People in this movement don't realize what it is, who the leaders are, and how saturated this movement is with anti-capitalist, straight-up communist rhetoric, violent racism towards white people. And again, that's not called reverse racism for those out there. I wasn't racist first. You didn't reverse it back onto me after I did it to you. You're racist. If you're black, you can totally be racist. And right now, this movement is pushing violence, racism, radicalism, communism, and harsh redistribution of wealth. And if the people in this movement aren't supporting these things, then they are being useful idiots. That's the definition. That's not what they support, and yet they're backing this group and backing this movement, which should be condemned by every American in this country, whether or not you're black, white, yellow, or purple. It doesn't matter what color you are, your background. A group that's calling for the outright execution of whites and cops, it's not something that should be supported.
You're right, and I agree with that part. But what I'm saying to you is that these, love the message, hate the messenger on this. I mean, it's the kind of thing where, yes.
I don't even love the message. You love the message of killing whites and cops?
No, I don't. No, of course I don't, Matt. What I'm saying is that, if I don't know how many of these people or how many of these events that you have recorded or that you've seen on this, but I certainly, the only times I ever really see any of this is more on a conservative slant. So granted, yes, if I see more on a liberal level, I will see the peacefulness and how these people are doing their best to try and create a message that says, there has been so much racism, and yet we never really knew about it. when you have one of Trump's, what was her, like, I can't remember her name, but Trump's, like, campaign manager in in Ohio, just resigned because of the fact that she says that there hasn't been any racism for 50 years in this country. And if you haven't made it, that's your own damn fault. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, I, to some degree, believe in individual I, of course, believe in individual responsibility. But it's such an ignorant statement when you're dealing with something that is so much bigger. And I, of course, abhor the idea of having, communism and redistribution of wealth being lumped into something like Black Lives Matter, including reparation.
So this is just an example here, Mark, of the kind of things that I've heard while I've been at these lefty rallies, for example, in Portland. Here's a Black Lives Matter talking about, a Black Panther. This is before Black Lives Matter, by the way. I think this is 2014 in Portland at the May Day protest. They're talking about how they want the complete destruction of the capitalist system. Here it is.
Welcome to On the Move.
You're fixing to get a raise because we're going to make sure you get more money because we want a living wage for every human being, every woman, every man, every dog, every cat. We want the cats to earn $15 an hour. We want the dogs to get $15 an hour. We want everybody to get at least that. Yourself, make an investment so we can continue to do this because they keep raising the fees. They don't want you out here. You see all them over there. Look at them. Anybody got any donuts for them? Take it over. Take it over to them. They look hungry to me. They look hungry. We got to do that because we got to break this fear. Some of y'all scared to death of the police. We ain't scared of no police. I see the police more than I see my family in my life. So we hear about liberation. I don't know about you, but I'm not out here having no festival party today. I'm here for justice and the complete destruction of the capitalist system. That's why I'm here.
The complete destruction of the capitalist system. But hey, Mark, we got to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about the featured topics that we have. What are natural rights and why are they important? We're going to make the argument in the next half hour. You guys don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore. With the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
Hello, MacPack. We're back. If you're just now tuning in, first of all, I want to thank you for your time. I know you have a lot of options out there in radio land, on the interwebs and all that, to listen to podcasts. And I really want to thank you for tuning into our show and giving us a little bit of time here to bend your ear and talk about philosophy, things that are incredibly important. We're going to be diving into human rights, natural rights, and I want to break these down into the most basic concept possible of why these are important. So Mark, let me actually ask you, why is free speech important? And let me ask, first of all, you do support free speech, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So why is well, and actually, before we do this here, you mentioned to me in text here that you wanted to finish up your comparison.
Yeah, I mean, just when it comes to it, is that, while I most certainly do not agree with the violence that's being advocated in the Black Lives Matter movement, I think that people are missing the initial message of it. It is being bent into trying to shape it into something because they feel, oh, wow, there's a lot of people behind this, so now we can throw in these extra. It's almost kind of like how, a bill becomes a law. It's like, the original bill might be to help children, but then all of a sudden we're importing polar bear parts from Canada, and we're having, paying off, say, prostitutes for, Anthony Weiner's, campaign or something. It's like, where did this all come from? And that's not what the original, bill was supposed to be about. Very much like with the Tea Party movement, and then it became this religious movement where I sat there with my own eyes talking or seeing these people trying to basically say how we need to shape law after the Bible. They were trying to make this a religious, basically turn the country into their religion. And so while that was never the intention behind the Tea Party movement, and while, yes, it was not violent, there is a lot of violence that has occurred from religion and how a religion treats its people. I mean, we see that all over the world right now, but Christianity is not exempt from that. And so when I saw these people trying to turn the message of the Tea Party on its head and trying to throw in all of these extra parts to it to say, oh yeah, it needs to be, a nation under our Bible, and then it needs to, and then we're going to go ahead and, and I was hearing basically this whole concept of, how we need an amendment to ban gay marriage and how we need to have this, and you're like, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with that. And that's where I see the comparison between the revolutions of the Black Lives Matter movement as well as the Tea Party movement. And yes, while the Tea Party didn't have nearly remotely any violence like the Black Lives Matter does, that's a different story in my opinion. I'm just saying the message that I was trying to send to you and to the audience is that these revolutions, which I'm in favor of and you're not, have taken a different shape because people are human and they will do these things for their own self-interest, which hopefully is a nice segue when we get into the Bill of Rights and natural rights.
So my issue, and I'll let you have that, but let me just point out my issue with revolutions, and I have absolutely no problem with thought revolutions. That's what I'm actually trying to do here, is to change the way people think about their rights and the way government works, and what that role ought to be with the government in relation to those rights. So I want people to think differently about that, have a thought revolution. But I am absolutely 100% against revolutions where we topple a government, we violently overthrow somebody, unless we've gotten to the point in this system where we literally have no choice, and we're not there yet. We are far from that point. I believe there are many options to where we can take control of the government and basically hamstring it, the federal government anyway, to where it doesn't have as big of an impact. There's so many different ways that we could go about doing that, but I digress.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about that today. So let's go into...
But just think about the nonviolent revolution of Gandhi and how he granted independence or got independence for an entire country of 1 billion people in India. I mean, that was nonviolent revolution. Were there some violence going on? Sure. Just like the nonviolent revolution of Martin Luther King Jr. There was a ton of violence going on there.
I think
the message was that there was a revolution here.
We're arguing here on semantics right now, as far as the difference between when I hear revolution and what I hear many of my friends, especially on the right, by the way. I don't have a whole lot of friends on the left, but the ones I hear on the right saying revolution, they're talking about like armed overthrow of the federal government, and almost like a a Bundy-esque standoff, which again I am a huge advocate of nonviolent resistance, and I wouldn't call that necessarily a revolution. I wouldn't call what Dr. King necessarily did as a revolution, because I'm referring to revolution as toppling the government, building a new one. And this is the thing I have to pump the brakes on. This is why I'm concerned about it, is because I don't want us to overthrow this government and this Constitution and replace it with something far, far worse when, again, typically revolutions rarely end where they begin. So, the only, so far as I know it, the only revolution that's ever ended in freedom and liberty is the American Revolution. These typically end badly, and they typically end in more of a collectivist vision or a strong man takes over. And those aren't things that I want here, which is why I am adamantly opposed to revolution. I think we should control the vernacular on that and not refer to nonviolent struggle, nonviolent resistance, peaceful protest as a revolution.
That's fair. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're calling this show Back to Basics.
Yeah. So, well, anyway,
we want to go back to the basics of the Constitution.
Exactly. So let's start. Let's talk about. I want you to make the case here, since you support free speech. Why do we need free speech? What benefit is there of free speech?
Well, in order for us to have a just and a democratic society and a constitutional republic at the federal level, people need to be able to, speak their mind. They need to be able to, without fear of government retaliation, overthrow, just because like what you just said, but basically, vote out their government. And so speech has been looked upon in a number of different ways in a number of different court cases. And I think a Supreme Court case, I think in like 1970, I'm not sure the name of it, called Money, a form of speech. And, how you give your money. And so we've seen how that's turned on its head a few different times, especially when you're talking about, like a Citizens United or something. But for the most part, you start to see how, the freedom of speech, we just talking speech here, or we're going to talk about press and assembly.
We'll go into all that in a moment here, but I want to, speech is the most basic here. So we have to really go into the most basic concept. So like, for example, I look at speech as basically if somebody can control what you say, all right, if they have the right to limit what you're allowed to say, that means that they have some kind of ownership over you. They have some ability to dictate what you say, so they must own you in some way. They must have some authority or right over what you can do with your body, just speaking being one of them. So this basically cuts into the foundations of self-ownership. And Mark, as a libertarian, this is something that you believe, right? So that you own yourself?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that was one of the major reasons why I was against a universal health care bill, because of the fact that if the government is basically calling the shots over your own health care, then you no longer own your own body. And so, that is what was so interesting about this, and this is actually something I read from Ayn Rand, who, the philosopher of objectivism and, who defected from Russia. She had said that what was so amazing about this country was the very first country that ever looked upon the individual as the means to the end. The individual before was basically just there to serve the state. Whereas what this country did, and it was the very first country to ever do, and this is really powerful, is that the government, the state, is here to serve the individual. And once you have that individuality, and it starts with the ability to freely think and to express yourself, which is speech, that ability to do so within certain limits. I mean, the government has said, you can't scream fire in a crowded movie theater or something like that. But for the most part, it has upheld that so that the individual, being an individual and thinking like an individual, starting as an individual, creates prosperity for him or herself. And then from that standpoint, then all of the others start to take place when it comes to religion and assembly and all, and press and all of that. But it has to start with an individual, and it has to start with the individual's freedom to think and then express themselves freely through speech.
So I think most of this it basically stems, all rights essentially, and as I've said, stem from individual rights. The collective rights are individual rights. It's all it means is that individuals have come together to work towards their own ends, and they all have rights. And they're, again, just because 10 people come together, they don't have the right to impose force and violate the rights of one person simply because they're now a majority of people or they're a group of people. This all cuts into the topic of self-ownership. And Mark, explain why you own yourself. Why doesn't someone else have a right to tell you what to do, to impose their will upon you using coercive force?
And again, I mean, I only take back from my reading of objectivism and my belief in it, in that it is what the definition of morality is that the preservation of human life is the ultimate and is the definition of morality. So when I say the ultimate, it really is the final end, is that we as individuals are protected by certain rights because of morality, and that we are not sacrificial animals to a state. And what we've seen from that is not only just the aspiration and almost the envy of the rest of the world. And I mean, people coming here in droves. I mean, on with the Ellis Island type of immigration, and people even coming in from all over the place, especially Mexico, and going, this is where you can really make it, and this is where you can really prosper, and this is because of the fact that we have that individual freedom. And what was so interesting to me about this, Matt, is that when I remember back in 8th grade, I believe, and my math teacher, and I don't know why this was it, but it was the number one thing that Russians and the rest of the world, like the rest of the communist world, has aspired to. The number one thing that they wanted more than anything. It wasn't food, it wasn't shelter, it wasn't water, it wasn't clothing, it wasn't love, it wasn't decency, it wasn't respect, but it was freedom. It was freedom. It was individual liberty, to be able to do what you want to do. And that stems from that morality, and that's the reason why it must be the ultimate in terms of the standard of what a free society is. And that's the reason why democracy is so important, because we can democratically elect our officials, and then we can, on a local level, determine by our vote, which is another part of our speech, what types of laws that we have, and through referendum or through initiative, how we change those laws. And then on a national level, we are a constitutional republic, or at least we were originally. And that, even at 50+1%, that was the ultimate, is that what freedom of speech is supposed to protect is, really what's supposed to protect is the most offensive, the most ridiculous, the worst, the little guy, the one that thinks and feels differently than all of the rest of us. Because as we've seen throughout history, the majority, the strong majority rule was that, the sun revolved around the earth, and the earth was flat, and the humans couldn't go more than a certain, speed without, disintegrating into thin air. And yet, the people, the minority, the Galileos and the Copernicuses of the world, they looked at this and said, no, what about this? And they changed not only the public perception, but they changed the course of human history. And they were burned at the stake. They were heretics because of it. And so that's the reason why it's so important to have that type of, classic liberal freedom of speech, is because of the ability to challenge the system and to challenge religious dogma, or to challenge the law itself without fear of retribution. And that's why it's so important.
It all does stem around morality, as you said, in relation to you owning yourself. You own the fruits of your labors, the things that you do. Your property belongs to you, and no one should be able to impose their will upon you to take it or to make you do something against your will.
Unless you violated the rights of others.
Exactly.
If you violate the other rights of other people, you don't have the freedom to just go and kill at will, which is why they have that beautiful "we the people" type thing going on.
And where we go off the rails here is when democracy. It's a good thing. It's a positive thing, a change in the world of thinking about things. But it went off the rails when it started going into collectivism, and we saw that. I think it was in Athens, ancient Greece, when they basically start using collectivism to it's the tyranny of the majority. I mean, this is the perfect example of this, where they start basically taxing one group and giving out special favors. This is what we see today. And again, if we're looking at what is moral, if you don't have the ability to do something yourself, like, for example, me as an individual, I don't have the ability to come into your house, Mark, and take money out of your wallet. But
the government does.
No, they really don't. If you're talking about self-ownership, if I don't have the ability to do something, I can't elect somebody in order to give them the ability. That person doesn't have that right either. So the people
you say that, but they do now, and that's the reason why we no longer have a constitution.
Not natural law.
And that's the reason
it
why
violates
we have
self-ownership.
all of these people talking about the democracy. It's a democracy, and they love that word, especially the liberal left love the word democracy, because basically it's majority rule. The reason that you have to have a constitutional republic instead is because of not only slavery of the human body, where we deal with, and I'm not talking about whips and chains of slavery. What I'm talking about is any type of slavery, where it's taxation without representation, where it's, enslaving somebody, and if all you have to do is take 50 plus 1% of just the people who vote, and what if only 10% of the people vote, then all of a sudden, now look at the melee that you have. And that's what the powers that be are counting on, is that we don't get involved, we don't vote, we don't care, or we just vote for the lesser of two evils. But I'll leave that for the second hour.
So, again,
we're coming up on.
All of this stuff kind of stems around, and we're running short on time here. I didn't want to go so long in the segment. I guess we'll come back. We'll come back to this in the third hour. But all of this stems around the non-aggression principle, which is essentially you have your rights and you don't have a right to be aggressive and violate someone else's right, even if you're in a collective. Now, this is from Frederick Bastiat's The Law. This is one of my favorite books. It radically changed the way I thought about government and rights. First of all, this in relation to, let's say, the right of self-defense, okay? He talks about what is law in this. This is the second page. This is really right in the beginning of the book. He says, each of us has a natural right from God to defend his person, his liberty, and his property. If he continues here in the next paragraph, if every person has a right to defend, even by force, his person, his liberty, and his property, then it follows that a group of men have the right to organize and support a common force to protect these rights constantly. Thus, the principle of collective right, its reason for existing, its lawfulness, is based on individual right. And the common force that protects this collective right cannot logically have any other purpose or any other mission than that for which it acts as a substitute. Thus, since an individual cannot lawfully use force against the person, liberty, or property of another individual, then the common force, for the same reason, cannot lawfully be used to destroy the person, liberty, or property of individuals or groups. This is essentially saying that if governments were created for the entire purpose of people coming together and protecting their rights, their liberty, their life, their property, if that's why this government was created in the first place, it cannot logically be used to go against the life, liberty, and property of the people that it's meant to protect. All of this stuff. I mean, that's at its basics. Government, and the whole reason why we have government, and why government props its ugly head up every time, is because every time that a group of people come together and realize that, hey, if we have pure anarchy and there's no respect for property rights, and any marauding group of violent men come by and can just take the stuff that you worked hard for, what happens is people suddenly start putting their backs together and say, okay, well, I'll protect you if you protect me, and then more people flock to that, and eventually you have a group of people that are organized to protect each other, and eventually that's how governments are created. This is, and you may even have just one strong man who has a bunch of guns that says, hey, if you do what I tell you to do, I'm going to protect you. And this is why governments are created. Our government is unique in that it was created specifically for the purpose of protecting life, liberty, and property. It says so in our founding documents. Mark, do you have anything to say about that, or anything you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely, because in one of the biggest political arguments that we're having today is about the Second Amendment and gun control and whatnot, and what sensible gun control is, et cetera, et cetera. But so many of my friends on the left, who I think are incredibly misguided, are interpreting the Constitution, the Second Amendment, right, because the Bill of Rights are directed towards the individual. And again, what I would always tell my friends who don't like guns or think they should be banned, I'm like, listen, well, because they just think it should be for a militia. In other words, it should be for the cops. And I'm like, you guys don't understand, a police state, which is what we're kind of seeing, is growing out of the drug war and out of a number of other things. But in addition to that, you cannot have the First Amendment without the Second Amendment. You cannot protect your freedom of speech, your freedom of religion, your freedom of property, your freedom of assembly, your freedom to do any of that stuff unless you can physically protect yourself with arms. And so, the moment that we start to see the erosion of a Second Amendment is the moment you're also going to see, or right around the corner, you're going to see the erosion of speech and religion and property, et cetera, et cetera. And so, that type of that type of logic is where you start to get into, the Fourth and the Fifth Amendment, and then, because there's only a few of them. Who really cares about the Third Amendment these days? I mean,
I do.
Well, good. And
I don't want troops stationed in my house. I don't know about you, Mark.
True, but that's I think it's the least tried out of any of the Bill of Rights.
Oh, that'll be the last one. That's when it all comes crumbling down. The Third Amendment is when they start placing, because this is what they did in colonial times. By the way, Great Britain, they stationed troops in the homes of dissenters, people that they didn't like, or people that weren't in favor, and that the British officers were raping and assaulting the wives and daughters of these people, and they go to complain to the commanders, and they ignore them, because that's the purpose of them being there, is to be spied on and to be punished for their transgression or lack of support or whatever reason that they're not in favor. So this is that's when all the crap has hit the oscillating fan, folks, is when they start stationing troops in your house against their will. That's the last one that's going to crumble. And that's the one that I believe would be one of the worst, because all of your rights will be violated at that point. And ultimately, what I hope you all get from this is understanding that the non-aggression principle is something that we should be applying to our government if we don't have a right to use force against another individual, because we don't even possess that right. In our own rights, we have a right to do whatever we want. We can say or do whatever we want as long as we are not hurting anyone, taking their belongings, or producing a victim in some way. Even in the case of producing pollution. Let's say I dump toxic chemicals into a river that flows down into your property and you drink it and die. I'm responsible for that. I have hurt you in some way. Even though it was indirectly and I didn't intend for that to happen, I have still hurt you. I don't have a right to do that. So the non-aggression principle is something we should be applying to our government, and these rights are critically important, because if you don't own yourself, if you do not have clear self-ownership, that means someone else owns you. And are you prepared to accept that you do not own yourself, someone else owns you, and therefore can control what you say, do, and perhaps even what you're allowed to think? That's a scary thought, and this is why natural rights and natural law should be protected. And it's really the only way to have a moral, and this is somewhat oxymoron, a moral government. I think that that's how we get to the most moral government. And again, we talk about that kind of stuff every week. Ideas of how we can make this government more moral. But I digress. We got to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be on the line with Dan Sandini of the Daylight Disinfectant as well. We're going to talk about this upcoming debate, and I'm really excited to hear his take on what he thinks is going to happen in the debate, and hear Mark and them kind of hash it out. I'll give you my perspective on this as well, even though I don't really have a dog in this fight. I'm just kind of an interested observer. But anyway, we'll be right back after this break, folks. Don't go anywhere. Okay, my computer's kind of crashing right now, so maybe we won't go to a break. Maybe we will. I don't know. I got an hourglass on here, and I can't even unmute Skype. This is great. All right, so this is live radio. This is the kind of stuff that happens on live radio, folks. So we're just going to try to actually, you know what? I'm just going to reboot here, and if Mark and Dan can hear me, go ahead and call back in a couple of minutes. Anyway, so let me kind of focus here while this computer's rebooting here on something that I find kind of interesting. It's the idea that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. This is one of the interesting reinterpretations of the Constitution. We're supposed to have a freedom of speech, and the First Amendment was intended to protect us from Congress passing a law that would violate our free speech, our right to say something. And the argument is that yelling fire in a crowded theater could potentially result in someone being injured. Personally, the way I look at philosophy and law, I disagree with the fact that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Just like if you were to say to somebody, you should, kill this person X or kill person B or something like that. Because of that, all right. Let me. Sorry, I got a text. I got distracted here. So the reason why I disagree with that is because you're not actually producing a victim in that specific instance unless you do. In which case, if what you said, for example, yelling fire in a theater, actually led to panic and a crowd running away and people trampling other people and things along those lines, if that's something that actually happened and it was a direct result of your speech, then yes, you violated the non-aggression principle. Your speech has indirectly hurt other people, just like in the situation of the polluting. It was involuntary. Maybe you didn't intend for that to happen, but you polluted maybe a toxic chemical into a river and poisoned somebody else. As a result, that was indirect, but you are still responsible. Just like if you yelled fire, if what you did actually led to someone being injured, then I think that should be against the law. I don't believe in the whole idea of preventative laws in order to try to prevent crime before it happens. And that's kind of the same concept with gun laws. And that's Dan and I. We actually had a conversation a while ago about it being illegal. Him having support of banning people from wearing masks in public. By the way, like anarchists in Portland who have these masks on. He was in favor of that, and I argue, first of all, that it's free speech, but second of all, I argue that it's a preventative law, and I don't agree with preventative laws. But anyway, my computer's finally booted back up. I'm going to try to cut to a commercial break. We'll do this one more time, and we'll be right back after this break, folks. You don't want to go anywhere.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
And we're back. All right, I appreciate y'all sticking with us at the break. By the way, Dan on Facebook, and if you want to follow Dan Sandini on Facebook, it is at Daylight Dis on, on Twitter, not on Facebook, excuse me. At Daylight Dis, D-I-S, for Daylight Disinfectant on Twitter. He says, at On The Move Show, at Mark Delphi, natural rights are what make us human beings. An attack on the Constitution is an attack on humanity. Dan, I appreciate you piping in with that. And first of all, thanks for joining us on the show.
Well, thanks for having me on the program. I have really been chomping at the bit here, listening to you guys talk about the Constitution and talk about the Third Amendment, especially because you guys brought it back to the Revolution in terms of when those human rights were infringed upon. One of the worst presidents in terms of infringing on the Constitution was Abraham Lincoln. So if you think about even that far back in history, that recently in history, I would say, in Sherman's March to the Sea, they occupied buildings and occupied people's homes, burned people's houses to the ground, burned courthouses to the ground, raped women, took their food. I mean, all that stuff's just trampling all over the Third Amendment, too. So I would say, it's good that we have this amendment. It's good that we have this amendment. Not the presidents have always adhered to it over the course of time, but yeah, you can't house troops in the people's houses.
Absolutely, and I completely agree. It's one of those things that it is so basic that most people don't even think we need it anymore, which is incredible that people would say. First of all, what do you think, Dan, about the people who are saying things like, the Constitution's outdated, we don't need it anymore, it's not important? I hear that a lot from a lot of millennial young people. Well, what do you think about that?
Well, I think they have to look at what the Constitution is, and the Constitution is simply a codification, as you eruditely put it, of natural law. It's a protection of natural law and natural rights as human beings. These are the things that make us human beings. So, a study of the Constitution entails a study of natural law, which is what, our founding fathers were students of it. And basically what you come to is that, what defines us as human beings is that we are sentient beings that are capable of free thought and free expression of that thought. And everything stems from that. And that without those things, we are not human beings. So basically, when you put prisoner in prison, right, you're saying, you're no longer a human being because you don't have that freedom of expression that everybody else has, okay? You're taking away from them something that's fundamental to them, more important than food and water. Food and water, you die quickly, okay? But without a freedom of expression, you die a slow death as a person if you don't have freedom of thought. It's a terrible existence because you're no longer being allowed to be a human being. And, you were talking about, yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. I really want you to rethink that one because it really, where that also stems from, and I know it's to protect people, but you really have to put limitations on free speech, reasonable limitations on free speech, so that everyone can have free speech. Otherwise, you get a bunch of noise. And no one can express themselves, right? If we don't have, if right now in this conversation we don't have this informal "you go, I go, you go, I go," okay, it's going to become people are going to tune this out very quickly.
No one's restricting that, though. Like, for example, if I want to right now, I have the freedom to just chime in like I just did, and you have the freedom to keep talking and over top of me, and I can keep talking louder. And this is spontaneous order that's happening right now.
Well, Mac, you do have a mute button though, so I think you do get, a little bit more.
There are times when
power in that,
there are times when I could have used the mute button and I haven't. So I'm just saying, no one is limiting your speech in this scenario here.
Well, you're true to your word. But I mean, if I can chime in on that, because I mean, Dan brings up some really good points on that. One being that my dad used to always say, and he was very much a hardcore conservative, but he would always say, your freedom of speech takes away my freedom not to have to listen. And so, I understand, and he was being facetious in that, but it is the kind of idea that, this opens up our ears, and where it's getting a bit extreme, if not extremely extreme, is on the campuses of our colleges in this country, where we have these safe spaces, we have these trigger warnings, and the University of Chicago actually sent out a message, I heard this on the radio the other day, that they were not allowing, and they were not, creating safe spaces or trigger warnings. They were not, it was not tolerated. And so I was really glad to see that, because that article that I sent to you, I'm not sure if I sent it to you, Dan, as well, but it's just how the liberal left is losing to millennials. And what liberal used to mean was liberty or freedom, like liber, which was a Latin word, right? But progressive, what their comment is that progressive could mean you're progressing down a hole. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're advancing, or that, and really what the just or the true cause of this is supposed to be is freedom. But just like what Dan said, it's like when you have a collective group of people who are kind of crowding each other out, where the democracy overrides the constitutional, the Constitution is where people say, oh, you can't say this word anymore because it's offensive, or you can't even, you can't suggest these particular terms anymore because they might be offensive. And that's where they're limiting your freedom of speech, and thus that's where the collective is overriding the individual right.
So may I suggest we steer this topic here for the purpose of that what Dan was saying about you support, right, Dan? I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but you support limiting people from being able to, in this one specific instance, yell fire in a crowded movie theater, correct?
Well, I've got other examples too. That's definitely one.
Okay, so the issue at hand here, from what I understand, is this is a law that is attempting to prevent people from being injured. Am I wrong?
In doing so, if someone's injured and killed, they can't express themselves very well.
Yeah.
They
attempting
have the right to watch the movie
that,
too.
Right?
Okay, which allows them, if they can't watch the motion picture and later express themselves about what they've seen and watch it in peace and quiet, they can't very well formulate an opinion and have freedom of thought on it. If some yahoo, is screaming out fire in the middle of the movie theater, that's an extreme example. Okay, but it infringes upon the rights of others. And as a libertarian, I know that that you guys think that same way. That you can do whatever the f you want. Okay, but you can't infringe on the rights of others, and that's part of that right there. And I'll just throw in one other quick example, and that is amplification devices in public spaces. There are limitations in downtown Portland. You can gather and assemble and have a rally, but when you get on the megaphone, okay, when you bring on an amplifier, okay, you just like your dad. I don't think your dad was 100% wrong. Your freedom of speech is impinging on my freedom to listen. Okay, well, listening is thinking. Okay, listening and thinking and formulating thoughts and being able to you yourself have a voice in that as well.
Okay,
I think it's great. You follow me now, Mac. It's impinging on other people's rights. Okay, that's what I think.
Let me clarify. I want a quick answer here because I want to move to something else here, but I want to clarify. Do you
Is he calling us
believe?
long-winded, Matt?
No, I'm not. No,
Dan, is he
but
calling us
we're going
long-winded?
down. We're going down a different rabbit hole here, and I want to focus here. I want to because there's something I want to get at here. So, Dan, I look at freedom. The yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. This is a preventative law. They want to prevent somebody from getting their rights violated in that they don't want to be trampled to death. I get it. Would you agree that's the purpose of making it illegal to yell fire in a crowded movie theater, because they don't want people to get trampled to death and they want to prevent that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I just want to clarify that. So now
Way to be short and sweet, Dan.
this is the basis.
Yes.
This is the basics of this argument is laws to prevent bad things from happening. It's not that the bad thing is illegal, which it's already illegal. It's again damaging other people if your actions led to somebody being hurt. Like, for example, let's say I shoot a bullet just randomly into a public land. That I shoot it into a hill. Boom. That shooting the bullet wasn't illegal. But if shooting the bullet ricocheted and hit somebody else, then my actions hurt other people, and that was an inadvertent thing. So, look, and you could say intention, and I understand, yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. You could have the intention of hurting other people and things like that. I get it, but where I'm coming at is if it doesn't happen, if it doesn't produce the result of anyone being hurt, then you literally have a victimless crime. If somebody's in the crowd and yells fire and nothing happens, and no one gets up, no one runs, no one's trampled, then who's the victim?
I would say if I'm sitting in that theater and I'm watching a movie, and it's like one of Dinesh D'Souza's movies, I have been deprived of the right of being able to process that information at that particular time. It's a disturbance, okay? And so it's not only a danger to one's physical beings. It's an assault on your rights as another human being.
But you have a freedom. You have a freedom of movement. If you don't like the speech you're hearing in any situation, you can leave. You have the freedom to walk away. And in the situation of a movie theater owner, for example, if I own the movie theater and I don't want somebody in my movie theater yelling fire, I have the freedom to ask them to leave. So how are they violating your rights?
Can I chime in on that?
The damage is done. The damage is done, man.
Okay, go for it, Mark. What do you got to say, Mark?
Well, I mean, I kind of agree with you, Mac, and I slightly disagree with you, Dan, even though I get where you're coming from, but it almost stems from like the nanny state, where it's like the protectionist view,
exactly.
Where we need to protect people, and so people don't have the personal responsibility of it's almost like where crowd shaming can come into play, where people start to say, it's like you yell fire, there's not a fire. People have taken personal responsibility to look around them and to not see the fact that, okay, there isn't a fire around me, so we're going to shame you into never doing something like that again, where we start to really, we can start to see how, we wouldn't necessarily need that law, and it's a kind of cradling effect that I think carries us forward into, say, fat shaming, where you can't say, you legally can't, call somebody fat because their feelings might get hurt. Whereas, hey, maybe if there were enough people looking at, somebody who's overweight and saying, hey, look, you need to be, watching your weight, maybe that might change their attitude towards things. So, I mean, I can extrapolate that to a number of different respects, when we're talking about public safety versus, just how people feel. But then again, where do those lines get blurred?
This is a conversation I've had a lot with open carry, for example. So, Dan, what would you say that if somebody was they disagreed with me open carrying in public, and for example, I went to Burgerville and I walked in there, and people have a right to be in Burgerville. If as long as it's open to the public and they're okay, they're not violating the property rules or anything like that that the owner has, they have a right to be there and engage with their family. And let's say I walk in, I'm open carrying, and somebody disagrees with that and they leave. Have I violated their rights?
No.
Okay.
They can leave it. They have free movement.
Exactly.
They can leave if they want.
This is kind of the same thing. So, and by the way, Mark, I think it was an excellent comment talking about the nanny state. I look at yelling fire in a crowded movie theater in the same way of these preventive laws that try to prevent crime before it happens, even though the crime itself is already illegal. It's illegal to kill people, yet we have gun laws, and they're trying to prevent the crime before it happens. Now, for example, like the seatbelt law, Dan, what do you think about seatbelts? That's an anti-state law, and that's something that's trying to prevent something before it happens. You dying, but don't you have a right as an individual to choose what you do in your own car? If you want to take the risk of not wearing a seatbelt, isn't that choice left to you? What do you think?
Absolutely. You can wipe that law off the book right away. Now, if you want to not wear a safety belt, that's fine. And matter of fact, in certain situations, I think you could show where a seatbelt has cost a person their lives in an accident. I would say it's more often not than it is the case, but certainly that law. And if I rethink the movie theater thing, perhaps you're buying a ticket makes a contract with you and the movie theater owner. And perhaps if the movie theater owner can sue you for disturbing the show, and bring you to court and say that he's been damaged by that, then you really don't need a law protecting against that, right?
I love it when we come together.
Is that a civil issue versus a criminal issue, where you're dealing with a civil? But I think, to your point, when it comes to the seatbelt, we're talking about an individual asserting their own freedom to wear one or not. Where I think Dan was talking about when it comes to the theater is that how you're affecting others. And so, a seatbelt, I mean, I've even seen where, if parents don't put a seatbelt on their child, okay, well, now you're affecting others. So I think there's a difference between a seatbelt law and yelling fire in a movie theater, simply because of the fact that you're infringing on, I don't want to say the rights of others, but you're putting people in potential danger for something like that. And that can be extrapolated to a number of different ways.
And I don't necessarily disagree with you on that. Maybe that doesn't fit so much in comparison to the fire in a crowded movie theater, but I was using it as an example of preventative laws that the nanny state does to try to prevent crimes before it happens, and it does so by infringing upon your rights. So that's really the only correlation I have in relation to that, is to show what they try to do. And I'm against these preventative laws that try to prevent crime before it happens, because the crime itself is already illegal. In the case of a crowded movie theater, it's illegal to have an action that hurts someone else. And if your speech incited people to run away, then that's illegal. If they trampled people, especially, and if it just interrupted the movie, and the theater person or the owner of the theater says, "Oh, that's an issue," he can either sue you for costing them revenue if people leave, use their freedom of movement, and just walk out because you're annoying them, or he can just ask you to leave if it's something simple enough like that. So,
can I jump in here on that one, because we should bring this to a real life issue where I think maybe we can have a little bit of a fun debate here.
Okay.
And this is when it comes to Donald Trump, who was clearly inciting violence in his campaign speech, where he's telling people, go ahead, knock him out, I'll pay your legal fees. I mean, there is no way that you can possibly look at that and say, that's not the exact same type of thing. I mean, that's actually like encouraging people to cause violence, and then you say that you're going to pay their legal fees. That is something that is not only unbecoming of a citizen, but it's certainly unbecoming of a presidential candidate. Dan?
Oh, well, hold on one second. Let me play the speech, and then Dan, I want you to comment on this.
Do you see how much violence there was?
Hold on, guys. Hold up. All right, hold on.
Rally.
Hold on. We're going to play the clip. Then, Dan, I want you to comment back and counterpoint what he said. Here's a clip of Donald Trump telling the crowd to knock him out.
And to have a crowd like this on our final day, can you believe it? This is the day. This is the day we take our country back. Remember that. This is the day we take our country back. So I got a little notice, in case you see, the security guys, we have wonderful security guys. They said, Mr. Trump, there may be somebody with tomatoes in the audience. So if you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously.
Okay, Dan, what do you think, man? Does that violate the same kind of principle there?
Absolutely not. Then why was there anything wrong with what he said? If you see someone who's going to commit an assault on somebody, you have every right in the world to protect that person.
Okay, so Mark, what do you say?
I don't think that anybody was having tomatoes, and even if they were, throwing tomatoes is, I mean, I can't.
Okay, then the premise of the
maybe you actually have a point there, Dan, because honestly, if you're talking about preventative measures and you're saying, hey, but to say knock them out is a much different thing than saying report them to security. I mean, there is a diplomatic way and a presidential way of handling an issue like that, and then there's a hillbilly rabble-rouser way of basically trying to take matters into your own crowd's hands, and I think that there's a clear difference there.
Well, I think Dan makes you
do have one. I mean, Dan has maybe a point there when it comes to, hey, let's prevent something like this. I get that, but there's a better way of doing it in a presidential candidate.
If he said beat somebody up, if he said beat someone up if they pull out a sign, I'd love to hear that quote if that exists. Beat somebody up if they pull out a sign, I'll pay your legal bills. But I don't think you could pull that one out of your hat. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't have that clip. That clip actually doesn't exist to my knowledge, and believe me, I've been looking for things like that. So, but yeah.
Well, I don't think he would mean it in his heart. I don't think he would mean it in his heart. That's why I don't think he would say it.
I think you have an excellent
on that one because.
I think you have an excellent point in that assaulting someone to prevent an assault is it's not quite the same thing. So, but let's actually deviate here because we were off into the weeds already here. So let's shift gears here. We're coming up on this election debate, the first one between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And first and foremost, before we actually talk about what we expect and what these candidates will need to do in the case of Dan, I'm sure I want to ask him what he thinks Donald Trump will have to do in order to get a good performance. But before we do that, Mark, your guy Donald Trump isn't in the debate. He's been excluded. What do you think? What are your thoughts about this?
Gary Johnson, you mean? Yeah, Gary Johnson. You said Trump.
Yeah. Oh, my bad. I apologize. Yeah, your guy Bernie Sanders. He didn't get in the election there in the debate. So what did you?
Damn it! Why isn't Ronald Reagan in this debate?
No. It'd actually be great if Bernie Sanders was. It would definitely be an much more interesting debate, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
that would be great.
So too. So Mark,
if we had a third party,
let me just say this. Let me just say this. Let me say this. Sorry,
Mark,
your guy, start out everywhere.
Your guy Kiefer Sutherland didn't make it into the debate. So what do you have to say about that, Mark?
Let's give him some name recognition, shall we? Let's feel the Johnson for a quick second. He is not allowed in the debates because of an arbitrary 15% minimum threshold for polling. This polling is arbitrarily selected on the basis of 5 arbitrary polls that the organization that handles the debates or that controls the debates has selected. So the challenge with this is that the debates used to be organized by the League of Women Voters, and it was a lot less partisan at that point. But then it started then getting to where the debates they're now controlled by the 2 parties. And, of course, they're going to go ahead and throw up a minimum standard that is very difficult to reach when the media doesn't give them enough attention. And if you're not in the debates, of course, you're not going to be able to get those percentages higher because of the amount of viewers. So, obviously, when we're talking about a corrupt system that Donald Trump has talked about, that Bernie Sanders has talked about, and certainly that Gary Johnson has talked about, something like 70+% of the population feels as though another party should be on the debate stage. While I don't want Jill Stein on there only because of the fact that I don't think she's a qualified person to be even running for president, I think that, we definitely need a different voice in this because while this debate's going to be entertaining, I highly doubt it's going to be very thought-provoking.
So, Dan...
if Gary Johnson's not in it.
So Dan, I'm just curious, do you think that Gary Johnson should have been allowed on the debate stage?
If I had my druthers, yeah, I think he should be. I think he should be allowed on the debate stage. He's a controversial character at best. Everybody who I know who have met him personally think he's a very intellectual guy, a very likable guy, and I think this whole concept of 2-party politics polarizes things to such an extent that the real issues are lost. Okay, the real issues are lost, and he gets into this. No matter what one candidate does, he's great or she's great, and no matter what the other candidate does, they suck, or he sucks, or she sucks. And I think that a third party brings a modality to that thought between people that doesn't exist without it, a dynamic to that thought and discussion and debate of the ideas. Take away polarity. Yep.
Dan, I think we can pretty safely say that Hillary doesn't suck, and that's probably the reason why we had Monica Lewinsky scandal.
Oh, he went there. Okay, so all right, let's keep the gloves up, guys. Come on, that was a low blow.
Okay.
And there was no.
Does anybody disagree with that?
There was no phrasing. I wasn't attempting to phrase when I said low blow. By the way, no pun intended. So Dan, I'm just curious here.
Now.
What standard do you think should be applied here? I mean, should anybody just be allowed to be on the debate stage if you're running? Should we have 100 people, 1,000 people on the stage? Is there a limit to how many people should be on the stage, and what qualifications should they possess?
Well, it probably should be a percentage of the number of states which they appear on the ballot for. Okay, so if you get on, I don't know. Should we say you get on 56 of the 57 states? Thanks, Obama. You can get on? No. I honestly don't know what that percentage should be, but it should be somebody with, should they catch a bonfire for some particular reason once they're in front of the American people, that people would at least have the option of checking the box on those people in their particular states. And I honestly don't know if Gary Johnson appears on, how many states he appears on, and
it is 50.
Yeah, he's all 50 ballots.
Yeah, I honestly, I think this is just another way that the two major political parties and the media complex can control the thinking of the American people. Like if we let them think outside the box for 1 second, all Armageddon will break loose. It's like if you legalize pot in Oregon, all of a sudden overnight anarchy will reign. It's just not the case.
Well, gay marriage, and then the seas will part, and then the ground will swell up, and if gays start to get married, then you're going to have tsunamis all over the place. Oh, wait, that was your fault.
Cats and dogs marrying in the streets, and just terrible.
Up is
it just
down.
doesn't happen. Give people the option to have that free thinking process. Absolutely. I'm not a particularly huge Gary Johnson fan. I think that he's a little bit too spacey at times for me, and he's also controversial and a little bit flip-floppy on some major issues, which would make him a libertarian. And I don't think we want to spend a lot of time debating it because he's not. Well, maybe you guys would argue that he's a viable candidate for president, but unless they're keeping him from being a viable candidate for president, that's really what's happening.
So,
Mark,
you're
watching it happen in front of you.
Mark, you were talking about millennials in reference to the left and how they may not tolerate the left, and that they've become more aggressive and basically the antithesis of what it is to be liberal. And I do think that millennials nowadays are classically liberal. Many of them don't even know what that means, but they do understand that the government shouldn't have a role to play in a whole lot of things like marriage, for example, what you do in your bedroom, what you can put into your body. I think they've become very libertarian. One other thing that I want to ask here about the millennials, though, is do you think that they're going to tolerate this two-party system and this information age where they've grown up accustomed to having unlimited choices and options when it comes to all things, whether or not it's food or what they watch? I mean, even basic cable has like over 100 channels now. So it just seems like this is an old, antiquated way of doing things. Do you think that will change because of millennials?
Yes, I hope so, but there's a positive and a negative to this. And when we're talking millennials, I think, and I hate to just categorize them into two categories, but just for the sake of brevity here, that you can, or convenience, you can put them into two categories. You can put them into the libertarian camp, which is socially liberal and fiscally conservative, or you can put them into, say, like the Bernie Sanders camp or the more socialist camp, where socially liberal, yes, but fiscally liberal. And it's the kind of mentality of the entitlement that I think, that quote-unquote kids these days are doing or are wanting. But those types of mentalities are more an approach or ideology versus a party. And I think that these millennials are sick and tired of the two-party system. They do want another option. They want additional voices. That's why you saw so many people coming out for a Bernie Sanders, and that's why you see so few coming out for Hillary Clinton, but yet then also so many coming out for a Gary Johnson, because it's like, wow, here's a refreshing new voice of a credible person. So while I disagree with Dan and that Gary Johnson is qualified, I mean, I think a two-term governor of a state where his party was outnumbered by 2-1 is exactly what Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton had, and both of them seem to have pretty successful presidencies. So while
I think he's qualified, I didn't say he wasn't qualified. I just want to walk that back a little bit. I didn't say he wasn't qualified. I think he's a qualified guy. I just think he just seems to me to be a little bit too spacey, I guess would be the word that I would have to use for it. He just doesn't seem
spacier than Trump.
There. Yeah, Trump
really.
And I'll explain that to you. I can explain that to you in the spaciness of Trump. The spaciness of Trump is used to being able to be the guy in charge who can say whatever he wants to say whenever he wants to say it, and I don't give a flip about what you say. It's my company, okay? And I'm going to say...
You can drop the F-bomb on here now, Dan. You can drop the F-bomb. It's an explicit
I know, but there's still... I mean, that has... That's distasteful.
I know. I'm kidding. Sorry.
I try to keep it, PG-13. That's what I try to do for guys. But I bring Mark on here, and he's got a potty mouth, and we just... Sorry, I apologize. Anyway,
we'll try and keep it. I mean, some will slip out. Some will slip out. Hey, what you're seeing the awkwardness in Trump now, particularly, is he's trying to rein it in and read it off a teleprompter, and also at the same time ad-lib it. And it comes across as this. It just comes across as very awkward, I would say, at times. Sometimes when he's on the prompter, he's getting good, but other times...
Dan, he actually said that anybody who uses the teleprompter isn't qualified to be president, and now he's using the teleprompter. But I'll leave it.
Yeah, I'll have to walk that back. Yeah, you have to. Well, you have to. You can't possibly live your life where you say every speech is going to come off as ad hoc. It's not going to happen, and you're not going to read it off a piece of paper because you're going to quickly find that people are just going to find that extremely awkward. So,
I agree with you. I agree that he's got
to walk it back. He's learning as he goes. It's like he didn't really think that. He didn't think that through before he said it, and I'm sure he didn't think it through before he said it.
Which is why he's not qualified to be president. If you can be learning on this job, Dan, you have to have some kind of experience in something.
Hey, Mark, I'm looking at. I just fact check what you said about the teleprompter. I'm looking at an article on CNSNews.com. This is Trump speaking about a teleprompter. He said, these other guys, they're going around, they make a speech in front of 21 people, nobody cares, they read the same speech, deet, he mocked. They have teleprompters. I say we should outlaw teleprompters, cheers from the crowd, for anybody, right? For anybody, for anyone running for president. I'm just curious, Dan, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that if you took Hillary Clinton off a teleprompter and you took Donald Trump off a teleprompter, the result would be Trump would give a better speech than Hillary Clinton would.
Which is exactly what we're going to see tomorrow night in this debate. And so I want to talk with you guys about what we're going to see today.
Yeah, let's talk about the debate. Let's
we got to cut to a commercial break. Before we do, I want to just mention here a report I'm looking at Newsmax, and this is saying this is from a study. They did a view of millennials. They say that the current view of millennials as liberals might be due to their age. Young people are more likely to be liberal, and they went on to say, but if you compare young people now to young people in previous decades, those now are more conservative. So this is kind of an interesting thing. There is a more conservative millennial group than we are being led to believe. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with the mainstream media. And I think that also, typically, from what I have noticed growing up, is that young people tend to rebel against the previous generation. We go against the grain of what we're taught. Maybe we eventually will adapt our reasonings to be what I would argue. When you grow up, you start paying your own bills, you become more conservative. But I think that a lot of the generations out there now, there's a lot of liberals out there, and I think a lot of young kids today are looking at it, number one, thanks to the movements like the Tea Party, where maybe parents have instilled the conservative principles in millennials, has maybe caught on. But in addition, maybe young kids are rebelling against this this whole liberal thing where they see Hillary Clinton and what the Democrats are doing, and they don't want to be part of it. And it's kind of the opposite of rejection that we saw in like the whole Woodstock era, where people where the young kids back then rejected the conservativeness of their parents. Dan, what do you think about that? Do you think there's any merit to that?
Well, thinking about the younger people being more conservative, I absolutely see that. I came here in 2006. It's now 2016. That's a decade right there. You never had conservative, I'll call them kids, down at Portland State University. I mean, they were there, but there were one or two of the ugly redheaded stepchildren were down there, okay? And now the cool kids are building the Trump wall, okay? And it's really pissing off this sort of the mainstream bulk of the liberal kids that are down there. But there's definitely, they call them what do they call them? Alt-cons. They're alt-cons. It's actually a phenomenon, and Milo is the perfect example of that. It's the war against public correctness, and it's on fire inside of the gay community. I mean, Mark must see this, okay? There's a huge following for Donald Trump inside the gay community, and I think it's something that's wildly underestimated by the left right now. These people are going to show up to vote. They saw themselves getting slaughtered in Orlando. They see the left is trying to take their guns away, and these people are firmly embedded in the Constitution. So I would say your observation, Mac, really is 100% correct, that there is this tidal wave coming and growing in terms of these newly conservative, and what we use as conservative for as a term now in current politics, which is old world liberalism, okay, which is the Hayek liberalism, right, which is nowadays conservatism. You see, there's a tidal wave of that going on in universities in the United States right now.
Mark, are you seeing this tidal wave in the gay community? Are you seeing that?
I'm not. I do see a few that I would call on the fringe in the gay community, and I think anybody. What's sad about it is that I mean, I'm not saying that they're for Trump. What I'm saying, I am seeing is more of what I would call a libertarian approach, where I think millennials first. Let's just take one versus the other. I mean, the gay community versus millennials. There are gays in the millennial, of course, and but my point is that if you're talking about the millennial community, the reason why they're shifting more libertarian is because they're starting to see the fact that Social Security isn't going to be around for them anymore. The debt is crippling them, that they're paying, all of this money when it comes to, the taxes, and they're going towards interest on national debt of things that they've never, they weren't even born when this stuff was being spent. And so it's like, why is it that they're going to have to pay for all of this? And so I think that there's that faction of the millennial population that's seeing that. On the gay side of it, I see there are going to be a number of people who are, yes, I mean, they're for Trump, but I think it's, it's much more on, it's, those people are the squeaky wheels that are getting the grease. I do not see the majority of the LGBT community. In fact, I see a small faction of the LGBT community being in support of Trump. In fact, many more LGBT people are in favor of Johnson, I would say, than they are in favor of Trump. But then again, I am biased, and that's what I'm looking at. You know what I mean? That's what I'm looking for. So.
Okay.
Mark might be right, but I would say there's an order of magnitude number of these people in the last 10 years. So it may still be a significant minority that are supporting Trump right now, but 10 times more than it would have been 10 years ago. It would have been impossible to see that kind of following for a conservative candidate back then. And you guys will argue that he's not a conservative, and we don't even want to go there right now, but you follow.
Yeah, he's a pop star, so yeah, I mean, naturally you're going to have people coming out of the woodwork, just like with Jesse Ventura. I mean, I think, when Jesse Ventura won Minnesota, which is back in 2004, 2000, I'm not sure when he won it. It was early 2000s, and they were doing exit polls, and they were saying, hey, look, who did you vote for? Jesse Ventura. Why did you vote for him? Because I really love pro wrestling. And it wasn't had anything to do with governance. It was the idea that they, that they liked his popularity and his stardom.
All right,
and the war on public correction, the war on public correctness.
All right, guys, we're going to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk about the what we expect in this election, in this election debate, and really dive into what we think each candidate is going to need to do in order to have a good performance out of this. So we'll be right back after this break, folks. Don't go anywhere.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. This is well into the second hour of the program. This is On the Move with Mac Worley. We broadcast every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we talk about all things government, guns, rights, liberty, philosophy, all sorts of different stuff like that, politics. And by the way, if you're new to the show, we broadcast at OnTheMoveShow.com. You can listen to the show there right off the web player. You can also check out our shop, by the way. We have lots of original designs made for you. So check it out. Click the shop link on OnTheMoveShow.com. Your purchases will go to helping this program get bigger, better, giving us more equipment, mixers, microphones. Hopefully one day we'll turn this into a web or a podcast with video. So we're working towards those ends. Also, check out youthrevolt.org. Again, youthrevolt.org. They just added us to their network. A big shout out to those guys over there. And I'm on the line right now with Dan Sandini and Mark Delphine, the unstoppable Delphine, as he calls himself.
And it's a little energy, a little gay energizer buddy or something like that.
I just don't stop you guys.
So what I want to do here is talk about this presidential debate. So Dan, going into this, now by the way, I want to keep in mind here, this is a 90-minute debate. There will be no bathroom breaks. There are no commercial breaks. There's no breaks whatsoever in this 90-minute debate.
Wow.
With two, let's just call them, plus aged individuals. They have they're accelerated in their aging process. That's all I'll say. So
we're to be politically correct.
Yes, there we go. But 90 minutes, and Hillary Clinton's with this whole supposed health issues. How do you think this is going to play out, Dan? I'm just curious. Dan, what do you think is going to happen in this debate, and what do you think Donald Trump has to do to really do well?
Well, Donald Trump, in order to do well, let's start at the end and work our way backwards. But Donald Trump, in order to do well, has to stay on the talking points and not be brought down to his basest level, which is, of course, the Rosie O'Donnell pig sort of thing. Okay, the moment that he goes there in any particular way, he loses this debate, because that will be the focal point afterwards. The media will focus in on that particular derogatory comment about that particular person or group, and that will become the focus of the liberal media. And if it could be perceived in any way of being racist or against immigrants, illegal immigration, then that will be a big problem for him. That's how he loses the debate. He wins the debate to the extent that he can remain looking presidential, look educated educated on the topics, spun up to speed, and not look like an amateur, okay, that's going to go into the White House. Hillary Clinton, in order to win, I'll jump over there and I'll throw it back over to you guys. Hillary Clinton, in order to win, has to be Hillary Clinton at her best, which is a statesperson in good health. And at her worst, she's someone who's caught up in questions about her questionable legal activities and her questionable health and ability to serve as President of the United States. So she needs to look. She needs to get her rest before the debate and eat her Wheaties before she goes in there, because she's under the microscope to see. She's under the microscope, right, to see whether she looks like she's actually viable health-wise. And I really don't think that kind of a level of scrutiny is being applied to Trump. He looks like he has the energy and the stamina to make it through 4 years as President of the United States, but Hillary certainly hasn't been looking at lately. I have to say, she don't look good. So those are the issues that I see that are presented before American people on Monday.
So, Dan, what would you like to see a reaction from Trump if Hillary Clinton just suddenly passes out? What do you think he should stand over her and take a selfie, or over the body with thumbs up, like the two thumbs? Do you think it's better with just one thumb or two thumbs over the body? I don't.
That'd be an awesome meme. It's an awesome meme. That's an awesome meme. But of course, he's going to do what he did with Ben Carson. I guess when Ben Carson was announced for one of the other debates, there was some problem with the loudspeakers or some sort of communication break. So here you go. You've got the other candidates passing him by on the entryway, going into their podiums, and you've got the one. It just looks terrible. You've got the one black guy just standing there. And Trump was the guy. If you really want to know who Donald Trump is the guy who doesn't give a flip and stood there in the runway and stayed with him and talked to him and waited until they had re-announced him and got him back out on stage in his proper order when he's supposed to be getting on the debate platform. And I have no doubt that if she passes out, he'll be the first person there to catch her. I don't know what the distances are there, but he'd be the first person there to catch her.
Do you think the debate team there, the Donald Trump prep team, is saying that he should do that? Because I think that would play out incredibly well. If she passes out and he's the first to render aid, that would definitely play up to people who think of him as a monster, and how could Hillary Clinton continue to call him a monster after he's the one that provided some kind of aid to her if she did pass out. He was the first one to show compassion.
If she passes out, it's not.
She's done. She's done if she passes out.
Done. You can't pass out. You can
rule number one in the presidential debate: no passing out.
So what if she
even if she has to sit down?
What if she goes into a 25-minute coughing fit like we've seen her do?
It's trouble. It's trouble. It's real trouble. And that's the problem. She really has to be on it health-wise. She really does. Even if she, what are they going to do? Deny her a seat? Okay, we're supposed to stay standing for this whole thing. But if she can't stand for this whole thing, are you not going to bring a chair to the lady? The minute she puts her butt down on a chair, in my opinion, she's lost the election. I can't see a lot of people voting for her. They're going to have to. The Dems are going to have to do something radical. I don't know what it is. Switch it around so that she's the VP candidate. I don't know how you do that and what's legal and what's not legal. But they're going to have to come up with something because it's a loss. The minute she sits down, it's done.
Okay, so Donald Trump's trying to accomplish what in this debate from your perspective, Dan? What do you think that he wants to accomplish? Is he going to be out there attacking Clinton on the record, or is he going to be more sitting back, subdued, kind of how he was at the in Mexico when he went down there and was speaking to the president of Mexico? It wasn't the you're going to pay for this wall, and if you say anything negative, we're going to build it 10 feet higher, and you're going to pay for it kind of deal. He didn't do that. Do you think that what Donald Trump, what version of Trump are we going to see at this debate?
Hopefully it won't be the Donald Trump that draws first blood, and I don't think he will. I think he's smart enough to know that this is his to lose, and that the way he loses is by being perceived as a bully. Okay, that's the worst place it could go. So for him, what I would like to see him as a candidate, and I would like to see him win because I think 4 years of Hillary will be terrible, okay? I think that he needs to look presidential, educated on the issue, and a steady hand. And if he is attacked in terms of his ability to lead by Hillary, his ability to counterpunch on that and bring her back to her record factually, but not on a personal basis, okay? Yeah, you can get away with a little bit of a personal remark, it's like, but not much of one. He has to be very careful that what he says does not come across as being misogynistic in any way, or against immigrants in any way, because that can really be a problem for Trump. So staying on topic, looking presidential is a win for Trump, and it's his to lose if he's perceived as a bully.
Okay, so Mark, Dan's saying that Donald Trump will need to look educated on the issues, presidential, and to appear that he has a steady hand, basically counteracting the whole attack of his temperament for president that Hillary Clinton has been saying. He doesn't have the temperament and so forth. What do you think the odds are that he's going to look educated on the issues like he has a steady hand in presidential?
I think it depends on a couple of different things. One, it depends on the questions, what they're asked, and how detailed of an answer they're being asked. Because I remember back in 2004, W did not agree to the debate unless he could see the debate questions first. So it really, in my opinion, showed W's lack of intellectual ability on those types of debates and his lack of ability to think on his feet when it comes to that. I don't think that's the same thing when it comes to this debate. So depending upon what the questions are asked, are they going to be asked in a very almost presidential way? What do you think about the use of nuclear weapons, or what's the greatest threat as far as terrorism, or something like that, versus Donald, you've called women fat pigs and you've called immigrants rapists. What do you say about that? That's the kind of thing that I think Hillary will try to get under his skin with, I think, and basically being, just coming up front and saying, you've clearly done this, Donald Trump. You have been, you're divisive in this area, whereas I'm trying to be a uniter, or, something to that effect. But I don't disagree with Dan. If he comes across as very smooth, palatable, he comes across as charismatic, that's really his biggest, that's his best feature, is his, his charisma. He's this kind of guy that gets people laughing, it's shock value. But he is really looking to, he's got the lock on independence, and so Hillary needs to knock him off of that pedestal if she wants to win this debate. She really has to get her footing back with women and with independence that she's not getting at all. And I can't say I'm surprised, but what I can say is just by default, like how, women especially, a lot of them are flocking to Donald Trump. And to me, there's an underlying current of almost self-loathing. Like women are like, I'm not really ready for either a woman president, or I'm ready for a woman, but I just don't like Hillary at all. Hillary needs to come across as likable, and that's very difficult for her. She's very smart, and I think she's smarter than Donald Trump is on these issues. But she can't come across as the type of person who is a know-it-all. She can't come across as condescending. And that's really where the liberal left has a big problem, is in their, I know more than you because I'm more educated than you, and you're stupid and you're an idiot. And that's where I think Donald Trump has really corralled a lot of his supporters, in that there are all of these people who are kind of being forgotten, and they're being left by the wayside because of the fact that you have the spotlight on all of, all of the progressive, in terms of, the Muslims and the Hispanic immigrants, and, you've got, Black Lives Matter, and you've got all of these types of things where I think white middle mainstream is just kind of going, well, what about us? And so that's really where I think Hillary has got to try to do on her end, is to try to go, well, this is where my policies will go. If she can stay on message, I think she gets this. If she can get him to freak out a little bit, she's been practicing a lot on this, whereas Donald Trump hasn't. And partly that could be a really good thing for Donald Trump, because his, the best debates that he's had is when he's really just been firing away. He just shoots from the hip, and it doesn't sound so scripted. That's where he's better at. Whereas I think his campaign manager, what's her name, Kellyanne Clarkson? What's her name? Kellyanne? Yeah, that was not Kelly Clarkson, but it's Kellyanne something. Kelly Clarkson. Kellyanne Clark. Okay, so I think she has done a really good job in terms of tempering him. And if he can, maintain his cool, if he can show his if he, just like what Dan said, but if I can elaborate on being presidential, it's articulate in your words. It's showing that you know the issues. It's showing that you know world leaders. It's showing that you know how the conflict in the world is becoming. Because while the economy is a very big thing, foreign policy is also, it's not the second biggest thing, it is the biggest issue when it comes to this particular presidential race, which is why, Hillary's got to show, hey, look, I've been Secretary of State. I know these foreign diplomats. I know this a lot better than Donald Trump, and he can be aggravated by a tweet versus me, who keeps my temper. So that's how I feel.
Hey, Mark, you're coming in broken. We can't hear you. Perhaps you should relocate to an area where you have better signal. But yeah,
right there. Yeah,
there you go.
Yep.
Yeah, I can hear Dan perfectly, but not you. So let me just comment here on a couple of things here, because I disagree here. I don't think that Donald Trump is going to beat Hillary as far as being educated on the issues. I think she does know policies better than him. I don't think she really talked. This entire campaign has just been about Donald Trump, how she's not Donald Trump, and how she will continue pushing along, doing being the third term essentially for Obama. She hasn't really talked a whole lot about policies. But if we're talking about being educated on this issue, I don't think that Donald Trump has a real chance to excel when compared to that. I don't think that he has that kind of information. I think what he should be doing really is trying to turn the tables and illustrate how Hillary is corrupt, what she's done with the Clinton Foundation, how no one really advocates for Hillary's accomplishments during her time as a senator or a State Department. She hasn't really accomplished anything except for her policies in the Obama administration leading to the creation of ISIS, because now with leaked documents we also know, and my theory has been confirmed, that what they were doing in Benghazi was arming Al-Qaeda in Iraq. We know this to be fact now, thanks to leaked documents. So these are the things that I think Donald, and I disagree with you, Dan. I don't think that he should be subdued. I don't think he should be trying to do that, because I think he'll lose in that. He should be not necessarily attacking her, but continue. Anytime she talks about something about him, if I was him, I would turn the table around and be like, "Look, you're crooked Hillary. This is what you've done. If you're running on your experience, what have you accomplished? Put her on the spot. What have you done that has made Americans' lives better, other than the stuff that you've accomplished to make the world unstable and to line your pockets with foreign money? So while accepting while providing favors for foreign governments. So these are the kind of things that I think he should be talking about and really putting the pressure on her. And she's so robotronic, I don't think she would react very well. When pressed, I believe we'd see another one of these "what difference does it make" moments coming from Hillary Clinton, and I think that would be better for Donald Trump. I don't believe there's any benefit in him trying to pander to women. He's doing horrible among women, and that's the biggest voting bloc in America. But we saw he tried to do a little basically pandering to the women by the daycare, the free daycare kind of crap that he's pushing, and now suddenly that's a conservative principle. I won't get into that, but you get the drift. One thing I will say is Hillary, she is conniving, she's kind of wily, and one thing that I find interesting is that, actually two things. Hillary has hired a psychiatrist or psychologist on her debate team to basically find out what makes Donald Trump tick. So they're trying to basically figure out ways to set him off, according to reports I'm reading. And then Donald Trump, I'm hearing news reports that he hasn't been practicing for the debate and he's not really taking it that seriously. I don't believe this. I do not believe this at all. I think because he has the persona of being the off-the-cuff guy who, he's kind of got that attitude behind him. I don't think that he wants to project weakness by showing that he's practicing a lot for this debate, but I think he is. Dan, would you disagree with that?
I think that Trump will have someone who's in charge of preparing him for the debate. I think that I'm not really preparing that much as, him saying that I don't need to prepare for this, okay, and looking like he's very confident. But I can almost guarantee you that there's someone in charge of that team, and that if it goes well this first time with whatever they come up with for having him front of him, whatever they prepared him for beforehand, her voting record, her criminal record, her record in Benghazi, all of that, whether he's well prepared and ready to respond in the appropriate ways, ready to portray himself in the appropriate ways, that person will survive to the next debate. And if not, he'll replace that person. And I think that's how Trump works. He works like a businessman, an effective businessman, not like someone who's in charge of a government team, but somebody who's in charge of a company that has to make money. Okay, and money talks and bullshit walks, and he will fire that person just like he does on his show. He'll fire that person if that's what Donald Trump does. He puts someone in charge, gives them responsibility, trusts them for that particular episode, and if that works, well, then that works, and you get more responsibility. If it doesn't work, you're gone. Okay, and so Mac, I think that I agree with you that he has to start out with not taking the first punch. That's the thing. He can't swing first, but
you want him to be first. You want him to be a counterpuncher, basically. That's like his whole MO of what he says. He's I'm a counterpuncher. This is what I do.
That's exactly right. I don't know if he said that. I guess you're telling me he has, and that's exactly what he should be doing.
Yeah.
Is that he can't be the guy, but he has to defend himself vehemently, and it won't be hard because Hillary Clinton has something that Donald Trump does not have. She's got an albatross of a voting record, and she's got an albatross of her ethical behavior.
I thought you were going to say a penis, and I was going to argue we don't know that for sure. We're not positive that she doesn't, so don't, Mark, you're still boggled, man. Hang up, call back, man. I can't understand a word you say. It sounds like you're in
Mark, you got something going on.
Yeah, okay.
Call back.
So anyway, but yeah, so for that, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think that there are some issues with him coming right out the gate swinging. But I could be wrong. Perhaps it would be a negative result if he's actually attacking her right off the bat. And I think there is some benefit in him waiting until she draws the first blood and then attacking. And I think that if he did attack by turning the tables, and just saying, oh, if you're going to come at me for this, well, why don't we talk about your corruption and
you created ISIS. That's all you have to do.
You're the founder of ISIS. Yep. You created ISIS. You and Barack Obama. So, Mark, you there? I think you're back here.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're perfect. What do you got, man? What do you got to say on that?
Okay, great. Wow, that really sucks because I was on this big diatribe and somehow if you didn't hear I don't know what you heard or what you didn't, but I was like, wow, I'm really on a roll here. And then all of a sudden you're like, I can't hear a damn thing. So anyway, I could hear everything you guys were saying.
George Soros coming after you, censoring you. Go for it. Sorry. You were saying.
That's right. But can you hear me now?
I hear you. You're loud and clear.
So yeah, the thing is that, I think Dan's right. This is Donald Trump's win or lose. And the interesting part of this, and I'm not sure if this is what you heard, is that Donald Trump does have a lot of women in his camp. He has a lot of women followers, and according to Reuters, he has like 48% of his camp are women, and so it's an interesting
when you
thing
say
because
his camp, are you saying supporters? Is this a polling?
Yes, his supporters.
Really?
According to Reuters poll.
Is this recent? Because the last I saw, he was getting demolished, but he has had some major uptick, and he's now neck and neck in the polls. Last I looked, so you're saying that he's been able to gain some ground. Do you think that has something to do with the handout and daycare and things like that, and softening his image, staying on teleprompter?
No, I don't. I think it has to do with the fact that women don't like Hillary Clinton. A lot of women do not. And again, I think we've all talked about this, is that, I saw on one of these political shows this morning, this is that, the presidency shouldn't be about who we like more, or who's more likable. It should be about who can do a better job. But unfortunately, it is. It's about likability, and that's the kind of thing, fortunately or unfortunately, just the way that you look at it. But Hillary Clinton is not a likable type of person, whereas Donald Trump has said some of the most insanely offensive things that you would never consider a presidential candidate to do, and yet he's ahead. And that is 100% because of his likability and because of Hillary's lack of likability. Now, granted, you can talk about corruption and you can talk about, emails and all of that kind of thing, but to me, those are the types of things that, a lot of presidents have been corrupt. A lot of presidents have presidential candidates have had a lot of skeletons in their closet, and yet they've come out on top. The challenge that I have, and this is what I'll throw to you guys, and maybe just this is more my left leaning, but I look at this as, how in 2008 we were looking at the first black president. In 2016, we're looking at the first woman president. And I think we look at it in a different way. It's like we can look aside with race, and we can go, okay, that really isn't, I know that there were a lot of people when it comes to it who just didn't want a black president, but for the most part, obviously, he won. He won twice. But when it comes to Hillary, I think she's got a problem, not only just among men who are like, they would never say it, but I think that they wouldn't really, in the heart of hearts, don't want a woman president. They might not trust her that she would do a good job because she's a woman. But also, and more importantly, the fact that you have the fact that several women are just not interested in having a woman president. And whether it just be Hillary Clinton and her lack of likability, but I think it also has to do with, there are a lot of women that just don't trust another woman. And I mean, this can go even down into like HR issues where, I've heard my female friends who are in HR, human resources, and they say, I don't put two type A women in the same, department or in, cubicles next to one another because it can get into a cat fight. And as sexist as that might sound, it's true. I mean, it happens. And so it's the kind of thing that, to me, Hillary Clinton needs to really come across as, when it comes to presidential, but she's got a really big hurdle to get over that I think, a lot of us, we would give a pass to Hillary Clinton's past if she were a man, but I don't think we are because of the fact that a lot of us just don't trust her as a woman. I'm not sure what you guys think about that.
It doesn't matter to me at all whether or not she's a woman or a man. That doesn't matter. I don't trust her because she is corrupt. Because I'm
not talking about you though, Mac. I'm talking about what you think the country is thinking because she's obviously not winning as much as she should. Look at where Obama got with blacks. I mean, Obama got something like 90-something% of blacks. Whereas I know that Hillary Clinton is not getting nearly that amongst women. And granted, Obama didn't have that many skeletons in his closet. He was only a two-term senator, or 2-year senator. I mean, geez. But the idea is that, Hillary Clinton is not winning as much favorability amongst women or amongst minority men. I mean, blacks, in those communities as what you would think a progressive liberal Democrat who is, aiming to be the first in her, minority category as president. I mean, I think that says something, don't you? Is it just her lack of likability, or is it because of an inherent sexism?
No, I absolutely don't think. In fact, I would say that the lack of support from the minority community is because she's not Barack Obama, the untouchable man who, again, I argue for, and I've argued since it happened that a lot of this, look, people will make the argument that I'm being racist here, but this is a fact, all right? People came out, and just based on the people that I talked with that voted for Barack Obama, many of them did vote for him indeed because he was black. Now Obama is saying that he's going to take it as a personal insult if blacks don't rally behind Hillary Clinton, and again, that she's not going to get the same status that Barack Obama did because he was the first black president, and people wanted that, and especially people in the black community thought of it as an empowering moment. And by the way, he wouldn't have been elected if white people didn't vote for him either. 76% of the population is white people, so some of us had to have voted for him.
I think that's right to my point, though, Mac, is that when you're dealing with 13% of the population who comes out in droves for a man, of course, but he won, and he won by a pretty big margin in 2008. And he won pretty much, he got over 50% of the vote in 2012. But when we're looking at the first woman president, you're not seeing a lot of people rallying up for this, and a lot of women going, "Yay, this is the first woman president." They're not inspired like that.
I just don't think that Americans think that it really agree with Hillary Clinton that there is a glass ceiling that women can't get past. I think most people, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I personally don't believe that a woman could not be president one day. I think it is completely within the realm of possibilities. Just not this woman I don't want. I think most people feel the same way, and I think even among the left, they're probably assuming, I want a woman president, but it will happen one day soon. This one it's not enough for me to do this. Whereas Barack Obama, he didn't have the skeletons in the closet, as you say, and Hillary Clinton, she's lived her entire life in public, in scandal, essentially from the very beginning. So her entire life is plagued with scandals, not just the recent ones we're talking about that have gotten bigger and bigger since she started her career in her public life here, but. It's been decades back. I mean, if I was to sit here and talk about all of the Hillary Clinton or the entire Clinton scandals, including Bill,
oh my God,
we'd be here for 2 days talking about all of the things that she's done. This woman is the most corrupt politician in U.S. history, and it's verifiable. So this is the reason why I think that most people aren't supporting her. And they just think it's already going to happen. It's bound to happen one day for us to get a woman president. And I just don't think that many women really think that that's an impossibility, and that because of that they need to throw their support behind Hillary. I think they just don't like her, and nobody really likes her, which is why I don't think she's not going to get the top cover if she becomes president. She's not going to get the top cover from the media. Right now she's getting it somewhat because they're more afraid of Donald Trump than of her. But if she wins, the moment she gets inaugurated, that top cover that Obama is receiving, it goes away. Hillary Clinton won't have the media at her back. In fact, I suspect the media will be attacking her. I could see the potential for her getting impeached. And wouldn't that be something to see Hillary Clinton get impeached? And we already know that Bill Clinton
after her husband did.
Yeah, so two Clintons get in the office.
Awesome.
That would just be crazy. So, I could see that happening. So let me actually shift here for 1 second. Dan, what do you think the role of moderators should be in this debate? Because we've been hearing a lot of conversation about, is it the moderator's job to correct the record? If one of the candidates lies, should the moderator call them out, or is it the job of the other candidate to correct the record?
Well, I mean, if you're Trump, you're saying, I don't even need a moderator. Why do we have a moderator? Let's go back and forth between each other. And that goes back to classical schools of debate. And it's study as a topic, and the ability of people to actually get on a stage and debate one another without the use of a moderator would have gone on. I think in former times would have gone on, but now you sort of need one to sort of steer the conversation. What's the role of the moderator? Well, you've kind of caught me off guard. I mean, he's got to bring it to topics that are of interest to the voting public. He almost has a responsibility to do that. He has to sort of do it in a way that's fair, even though he may be partisan himself, which is a difficult thing to do. We all have our opinions, and so whoever's up there has to actually be nonpartisan, even though they may be partisan as a part of the debate. So I would say being fair, being a good referee, just like a good referee is in baseball or in a boxing ring, and then also being able to set the terms for the fight at the beginning of the fight, right? So to say, hey, no low blows. When you hear the bell, come up fighting, but when you hear the bell, go to your corner. Those kinds of things.
Do you think that it's for example, if Hillary Clinton says, I never sent or received classified information, is it the role of the moderator to correct that, or should Donald Trump come out swinging at that point?
I think you've got to some extent. I think that's Trump's responsibility, and if he can't do that, why is it we can always go back and replay that and sort of call him on it, but I think that plays to Trump's ability to know the history of things, right, and to know her track record. And so, no, I don't think that we're not there to have them guide our thinking, but we are there for them to set a stage for us to be able to watch the performance of these two people on. So I would say no, it's not the role. It's not their role to go back and but if they have a fact in front of them and that person continues to insist that a fact is not a fact, I think that there's a certain amount of pushback that has to go from the person asking the question to say, hey, I'm sorry, but the premise of my question is accurate. That is a fact, that you did say this on this particular date, or that you did vote this way in this particular election, in this particular issue. And so there's some pushback there in terms of establishing the factualness of the premise of the debate. How's that? But in general, to go back and review, in fact, check their entire answer, I don't think that's something that the person who is refereeing the debate should be doing.
Okay, so Mark, what do you think about that?
I do agree to a certain extent. I mean, if somebody's just blatantly throwing out lies, I just remember growing up and being a really young Republican and watching a vice presidential debate and getting upset because, it was something like afterwards, Dan Rather or Tom Brokaw or one of them were saying, there were clearly some statements by one of the candidates that were not correct, and it was between, it was a debate between Al Gore and Dan Quayle. And then I remember when Candy Crowley in 2012 was calling out Mitt Romney for what she considered to be incorrect statements of his and feeling, wow, this is really biased. Like, this is just obviously slanted towards the left, and I didn't like it. But I do happen to think that, especially when this election cycle has been so much less about substance and more about how the other person isn't that person, and how the gloves have really come off so many times in personal attacks and labeling and just having a completely different election. There might need to be a little bit more moderation to this, or at least more prep work, like what Dan said. The idea that, hey, look, when the bell rings, you got to stop. Because that's one of the things that I could see, like, after the ring, both of them just throwing punches and going, like, not really respecting that. And then it becomes an all-out mudslinging fight, which is really bad for us all. I mean, it just makes us look bad as Americans. And, frankly, I just think both of these candidates has made this, presidential cycle a debacle, and just something that I've lost a lot of respect in. I mean, I just think these two candidates, the fact that we have what you call the most corrupt candidate ever versus a reality TV star with zero experience whatsoever. It's a disgrace. I mean, it's an absolute disgrace that this country is having. These are the two people. I remember my dad actually coming up with, I remember when it was like Dukakis and Bush in '88, and he was just like, we have all these really smart people in this country, and yet we come up with these two guys. And I'm thinking to myself, I would love either one of those two guys right now, or both of them. Bring them back if you can. I mean, even in Bush Sr. in his old state and, Dukakis in his, it's like, that would still be a better, couple of choices than what we have now. So okay. I think, just to get back to the moderator situation, that the moderator, his job or her job really is not only to frame the questions in a way that is going to be unbiased as possible, and something that is something that is relatable to the country, and not necessarily to the candidate's past of what they've said, like what Megyn Kelly did, where she just rips apart Donald Trump for something and calls him out. But there is also something where how you handle yourself as a president needs to be addressed, and then that needs to be in a way a part of the framing of it too. So the moderator should be able to call somebody out if they're blatantly lying, but hopefully just keep it back on task and back on the message of what was the question, stick with the answer, and, if you didn't answer, I'm going to let everybody know you didn't answer the question.
So, for example, let's say Donald Trump says he never supported any kind of intervention in Libya, and the moderator decides to play, I don't know, let's say they play this clip right here, and they show Trump previously supporting invasion in Libya. Here it is.
Of Libya? I never discussed that subject. I was in favor of Libya. We would be so much better off if Gaddafi were in charge right now.
That's him in 2016. Here he is in 2011 in a second.
If these politicians went to the beach and didn't do a thing, and we had Saddam Hussein, and if we had Gaddafi in charge, instead of having terrorism all over the place, would be at least they killed terrorists, all right? And I'm not saying they were good because they were bad. They were really bad. But we don't know what we're getting. You look at Libya right now. ISIS, as we speak, is taking over their oil. As we speak, it's a total mess. We would have been better off if the politicians took a day off instead of going into war.
Okay, so that's him in 2016 in the Republican debates talking about he never supported intervention in Libya. Now he is in February 2011. He's talking about how we should intervene. Here it is.
In Libya is killing thousands of people. Nobody knows how bad it is. And we're sitting around. We have soldiers all over the Middle East, and we're not bringing them in to stop this horrible carnage. And that's what it is. It's a carnage. You talk about all of the things that have happened in history. This could be one of the worst. Now, we should go in. We should stop this guy. would be very easy and very quick. We could do it surgically, stop him from doing it, and save these lives. This is absolute nuts. We don't want to get involved.
Okay, so Mark, should they correct the record if in fact he says something like, I never supported going into Libya, and should they have that clip on hand just in case, and should they play that to correct the record, or should that be Hillary Clinton's job solely, not the moderators?
Yeah, I think it should be more on the Hillary Clinton stuff. I mean, it just makes the moderator look bad, in my opinion, but it is also something where we need to stick with the issues, not with what the candidate said or didn't say. I mean, he said, she said as a soap opera versus a, I mean, if they just twisted their words on that debate, where if, like, say, for instance, Donald Trump said something and then immediately turns around in the same debate and says something the opposite, I think the moderator could come out and say, wait a minute, I thought you just said this. But if Donald Trump says something, last year, 2011, I mean, people can change their minds. I think, that's a sign of a good candidate, not flip-flopping to appease voters. But if you get more information and you change your mind, I mean,
well, it's something entirely different. It's something entirely different to say, to change your mind and say that you never had that previous opinion. That's
yeah, but see, if you're lying about something like that, that should be the other candidate's job, in my opinion. So to answer your question, it shouldn't be the moderator. The moderator should stick to the message of what would you do or what do you think about what's going on right now.
Okay.
And that's where, how are you handling the situation in Syria? How are you going to handle the economy? Not, what did you say in 2011? Oh, that doesn't make sense because what I thought you said was this. I mean, that gets into playground, fighting versus presidential debate.
As far as going back and forth, because you talked about, them going back and forth, and I want to pose this question to Dan. So let's say Hillary Clinton and Trump really start ripping into each other and tearing into each other, kind of arguing back and forth at how that's not really the way these debates are supposed to be, and it's similar to how it was with Bush and Trump. Here, I'll play the clip. This is GOP, Bush and Trump getting into it, going back and forth.
The problem is we need toughness. Honestly, I think Jeb is a very nice person. He's a very nice person, but we need tough people. We need toughness. We need intelligence, and we need tough. Jeb said when they come across the southern border, they come as an act of love.
You said in September 30th that ISIS was not a
am I
not
talking
a factor.
or are you talking, Jeb?
I'm talking right now. I'm talking.
You can go back. You're not talking. You interrupted me,
September 30th,
Jeb. Are you going to apologize, Jeb? No. Am I allowed to finish?
Yes, one at a time.
Excuse
Go ahead,
me. Am I allowed to finish?
Go ahead, Mr. Trump.
So,
little of your
again,
own medicine there.
I know you're trying to build
Bush,
up your energy,
please.
Jeb, but it's not working
one at a time.
Well. Yeah. Look.
Okay, so Dan, do you think, first of all, this kind of thing is going to take place in this debate? And if it does, do you foresee, or what role do you see the moderators playing in that to keep it on task, or should they just let these guys chop each other apart?
Well, if I were Trump, and two different reactions there, okay? If I were Trump against Jeb, I would play that the way he played it right there, okay? But if it's Hillary, I'd kind of let her get away with a sufficient amount of that, because if you treat her that way, you're going to be perceived as a bully. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying that's the way it should be, but that's the way that they will paint it. So I would give her a lot more leeway to give an answer, but I would use the time that, I would use the time that she's rebutting, even if she's doing it out of turn. Okay, I would use that time to formulate an answer in the hope that I get a chance to respond to that. And if I didn't, then my problem would be with the moderator, not with Hillary. So if he's being treated unfairly, I think that he needs to turn that around on the moderator, okay, and not on the other candidate, because it'll quickly be perceived as him bullying a woman. So he has to be careful there.
Okay, so Mark, your predictions here on how this debate is going to go. Who do you think is going to win, first of all?
No, that's a really good question, because it depends on how you consider win. I mean, this isn't a knockout or a scorecard where, you have judges at the end. The judges are the American people. We'll see what the polls mean after that. But I think if you were really looking at a debate, if you were really looking at how issues are going to be talked about, and even bringing up the past of the of the candidates, I look at the past of the candidates as being an equal kind of, they're both messed up in their own respects. I mean, we can debate those, but if you're just talking about just issues, then Hillary should sweep the floor with this guy, because she has such a better grasp on all these other things. But if it's the kind of thing where it's allowed to be more of a mudslinging event, if it's allowed to be a lot more immature, when you stoop to Donald Trump's level, Donald Trump wins every single time. And that is just exactly what every pundit has been saying. It's like the moment that Hillary tries to get into a Twitter battle, she loses. He's a marvel at that stuff. And that's the reason why he won all of these debates is that, from Marco Rubio to Ted Cruz, who just endorsed Donald Trump, by the way, from those guys and Jeb Bush, which I agree, Jeb Bush was out of line in that particular debate clip that you were showing. All of those guys who try to stoop to a level of getting into mudslinging or he said, she said, or he started it, lose to Donald Trump because he's allowed to do that. He is a reality TV star. He's not seen as a politician where he can get away with that kind of stuff. I do agree with Dan, though, and there is that kind of double standard in addition on the flip side, that, if he is seen as attacking her too much, then he's bullying up on a woman, and that's really unlikable. So, I am really looking forward to this, where I've never looked forward. I mean, I've always okay, I'm going to watch this debate, but this I'm watching with popcorn versus watching with an intellectual curiosity. I'm just interested in seeing, how this is going to turn out, which to me is another reason why I'm just kind of sad for this country. I think this is probably going to be the most watched debate in history, and it's not because of issues. It's because we just want to see, it's kind of like watching a hockey fight or an auto racing, or an auto race. It's like we don't watch it for the hockey. We watch it for the fights. We don't watch auto racing to see who wins the race. We watch it for the accidents. You know what I mean? It's like this is the kind of thing that I see the American people tuning in for.
So who do you think, because I believe this election is really going to hinge on these debates and exterior events, like if we're attacked by terrorists again and things along those lines. So, Mark, who do you think is going to win overall the entire thing, the whole shebang?
Who do I think is going to win the election?
Yes, sir.
And I agree with you that I can't predict a situation with another terrorist attack. If that occurs, Trump, I think, has the edge. If I can't predict what Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are going to release in late October. If they release a major bombshell, I think Trump wins that. If Hillary Clinton has another seizure that's looked upon as like, whoa, this is a major health issue, Hillary Clinton loses because we don't want an unhealthy president when it comes to that type of thing. That being said, if none of those happen, Hillary Clinton and these debates are not seen as a mudslinging thing, and even if they are, I still think Hillary comes out on top. So unless we have any one of those three things that I just mentioned, terrorist attack, health issue when it comes to Hillary, or when it comes to, I can't remember the third thing. Now I sound like Rick Perry. What was the other thing that I just said? Anyway, if there's a major catastrophe that goes on when it comes to this, or if these debates are reduced to mudslinging, then I can see Donald Trump winning this. If none of those happen, Hillary Clinton should take this because she should win the debates just on virtue of the fact that she's had several presidential debates before. She's done this, and she's just smarter, and she's just a smarter person. So, that's where I see it happening.
Okay, Dan, first of all, your take on this election, who do you think's going to, or on the debate itself, who do you think's going to win the debate, and who do you think ultimately will win this election, and why? What factors will come into play here?
Debate, Trump. Election, Trump. And the reason why is because this election is not about men versus women. This is about the outsider effect. And that's what we've been riding ever since 2008 with Barack Obama. Barack Obama was not just a black president. He was a special cocktail of being the outsider and also a black president. And what you have in Hillary Clinton is a special case of being a woman, which is a great thing, okay, being the first woman president, but she's not the outsider. And no matter how you look at her, you can't perceive her as being the outsider. She's as much a part of all the bad things that have happened since Whitewater, since her husband was president. So she's got that huge high hurdle between now and the election. She hasn't been able to generate the enthusiasm that Donald Trump has, and that's going to show on Election Day. Unless they can somehow mobilize the voters to get out there, actually go to the nursing homes, throw them into the van and drag them to the polls, then they are not going to be able to throw her across the line. It's just not going. It's not going to work. And what you're seeing with Trump is you're seeing people of their own volition that are going to be first in line at the polls. Okay, you've got this great voter enthusiasm for the outsider, the non-politically correct person, and the person who does not stand for the establishment. And I'm not just making a campaign speech for him. That's the underlying current that's really running through the United States. It's why nobody's spitting on my car or denting my car or anything with Trump stuff on it in downtown Portland, because they look at that, and there's even a certain degree of people in Portland, in liberal Portland, that can look at somebody like Donald Trump and say, well, at least he's the outsider. At least like Bernie Sanders, he was the outsider. Okay, and so that's why Donald Trump's going to win this election. It's because he's the outsider.
Well,
I think that's a perfect analysis. That's really well said, Dan.
I think that no matter who wins this election, the real loser here is the American people when we have these two choices.
Agreed.
But, anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. By the way, Dan and Mark, I really do appreciate you guys coming on the show. And Dan, you're basically like almost a permanent fixture here. I really do appreciate you coming on.
I'm like a lamp, or a couch.
Yeah, you're like a comfortable couch. That,
like a comfy couch.
Yeah.
I'm more like the annoying guy. Honestly, I think people like to get mad at me on other shows that I'm on too. So I think that it adds. It's like, who is this moron? So.
Well, I think it's cool, though.
Great. If I can be that, that's fine.
We have disagreements, but it's all civil, and that's what I like about it. I love having you on the show. You got anything going on with Daylight Disinfectant you want to promote out?
I do. I have a video that's going to be coming out probably tonight or tomorrow, and I'll just leave you with that. And it's a gun video, so you can go to you'll be able to find it on my website, daylightdisinfectant.com, or out at youtube.com/Daylight Disinfectant.
All right. Well, we're going to cut to a commercial break. Dan, thanks so much for joining us, man. I had a really good time. And I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having on.
All righty. All right, folks, we're going to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, I want to dive into some of our other featured topics here. And first of all, I actually have to touch on this whole Ted Cruz endorsement thing of Donald Trump. It's something that's kind of stuck on my craw. But then I want to talk about the state convention. We're running out of time here, but the United Nations meeting in New York. And we're not going to have time to define conservatarianism today. We'll do that next week. So anyway, we'll be right back after this break, folks. Don't go anywhere.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. We're going to have to hurry up because we're running out of time. We've only got, 23 minutes left in the program, and we've got like 2 hours worth of material here. First things first, I want to actually talk about this state convention. Could this work? Is this something that could work? In the past, I have actually said we need to be very, very careful. We need to be very, very careful when we're opening up our Constitution to changes. The states convention, it bypasses Congress. It allows the states to amend the Constitution. And I've been very concerned about opening up because I know the left has been talking about being able to amend the Constitution and hijack this process. George Soros has mentioned it, and in fact, some of these lefties are out there basically pretending that they want this to happen. When in fact, I don't actually think that they do now. After receiving some new information, I think this might actually be the solution. I don't think it should be done until after the election, mind you, and I think it would be more successful if Hillary Clinton was in the presidency and Donald Trump wasn't around because, again, I think he divides the GOP. I think he creates conflict within the GOP, and we can't even agree on this candidate and what our policies. Again, he's advocating for progressivism, increased state, more redistribution of wealth, universal health care in the form of single payer, and this new woman's thing where he's basically handing out to women free daycare. So, but I digress. So I'm bringing Mark back on the line. Hey, Mark, are you there? Mark, you there? Oh, I guess he dropped off. Never mind. All right, Mark's not here. So it's just going to be me, folks. All right, so anyway, let's talk about this state convention and why it could actually work. One of the things that again, I was mentioning is my concern about it being hijacked. And there is actually less concern about that than I thought there initially was. Realistically, they can't hijack it for several reasons. We only need 14 states to oppose any kind of amendment coming through the state convention. So 14 states is all that we actually need. And as of right now, this is, by the way, this actually does not, it's actually more than this. I'll explain what I'm talking about here. As of right now, we have 23 states that have a Republican trifecta. And what I mean by that is they have the House, they have the Senate on the state legislature levels, and they also have the governor. We have 23 states that are all three of those, Senate, House, and the governor, are Republicans. So right there alone, and that's not even including just the states that we have control over, the Senate and the House on the state legislature level. So the governor, by the way, does not play a role in the state amendment process. He has no authority in that. So really, there are realistically more than 23 states right now that are in GOP control, which is, that's kind of a big deal. It would require us to lose control over that many states that are hardcore red in order for us to lose control of the state convention, which I don't foresee something that would be possible. If we can't get 14 states to oppose, for example, an outright ban on weapons, trying to pick up your guns, as Nancy Pelosi, I think it was, or I can't remember who said it, but Mr. and Mrs. America, turning your guns kind of thing. If they wanted to pass that kind of amendment in the Constitution, they wouldn't be able to because we have the ability to block them. And I do believe this is the way to go about doing this. I think it should be done after the election. Another limiting factor here of how they wouldn't be able to hijack it is the single subject convention. And this is an article here written by Robert Kelly, J.D. This is an attorney. He's talking about the Article 5 convention. And he says, much of the opposition to an Article 5 convention hinges on fears of a runaway convention. Convention opponents frequently argue that a convention is inherently unlimited, and once it convenes, it cannot be restricted in any way. Historical practice and contemporary scholarship have roundly debunked this myth, but it continues to rear its head whenever serious efforts to call an Article 5 convention gain momentum. What follows is a brief account of the text, history, and the purpose of Article 5 as it relates to the ability of the states to limit a convention to the consideration of a single topic or set of topics. So essentially what this article is talking about is the ability to construct this convention around only one topic. So if your topic is, for example, to cut back and reduce the federal government's powers, if that is the topic that you're doing, you can't possibly interject a new amendment that would enhance the government's powers, because that's not possible. That violates a single topic, and that, again, these are the limitations that we can impose. And I've been researching, trying to find out if this is something that maybe is a mistaken interpretation. But I'm reading expert after expert that says the single topic, single subject convention can actually prevent this from being hijacked. Something to think about. Let's keep in mind that, you know, and this is a serious check and balance upon the federal government's continued expansion. And they use things like the Commerce Clause, as I've said time and time again, to expand what they can regulate. Now, according to Supreme Court regulations, they use, or Supreme Court reinterpretation, they use the Commerce Clause, which was supposed to give them the ability to regulate interstate commerce, trade for profit that is crossing state lines. And what they're now able to do through the reinterpretation from New Deal legislation, thanks to FDR threatening to pack the courts. Anyway, because of this, they are now able to regulate trade that is not for profit and not trade. It can be for personal consumption. That's even if it's not crossing state lines. So now they can regulate everything through the Commerce Clause. And again, they have expanded their power. The states not being able to, elect their own senators, which that was the original intent in the Constitution until the 17th Amendment was added, which gave people, the voters, the people of the state, the right to elect their senators. Before, that was selected by the state legislatures, and that was a check and balance, and it gave some state sovereignty, some state rights, because that would mean that the House of Representatives was representing the people, and the Senate was representing the states. So the senators inside the Senate would be acting in the interest of the states and what their legislature would want. So now we have dual representation as citizens in the House, and now we also elect our senators. That really usurped a lot of the sovereignty of the states. I think Article 5 of the Constitution is an excellent way to go about restoring state rights and really hamstringing the federal government power. And I would love to also see things like, adding term limits to Congress, because there's absolutely no way we're ever going to see Congress use the amendment ratification process that they have to restrict their own terms. They're never going to impose term limits on themselves. But I digress. I will share this out on my social media. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now on our group. That's facebook.com/groups/OnTheMoveShow. This is the link to the single subject convention that I just posted out. It doesn't have any thumbnail on that, so please go ahead and click it nonetheless. I will also share it out on my Facebook, facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. You can read this article for yourself and see if you believe anything about this the single subject convention. See if it's something that you would support. So anyway, read it for yourself. Don't take my word for it here. But let's go ahead and move on to the next topic here. We had a big meeting here of the United Nations. They did their UN General Assembly in New York this last week. And I want to play a clip here from Obama. First of all, Obama is at the UN, and I find this to be particularly interesting. First of all, Obama goes into the fact of proxy wars, and let me read from the statement exactly what he talks about. He says, and I'm quoting, "Across the region's conflict," referring to Syria, "we have to insist that all parties recognize a common humanity and that nations end proxy wars that fuel disorder." I mean, first of all, I find this kind of comical, considering that the United States has been operating a proxy war even before Russia got into this. United States was arming the so-called moderates who were undermining the regime in Syria. They were trying to topple Assad, and then Russia steps in. This proxy war was actually started by our government, not just in trying to topple Assad, but in creating the power vacuums, arming up Al-Qaeda in Iraq through Benghazi gun running, who then went off to fill the power vacuum when we pulled up stakes and left Iraq. They rush in there with our weapons, pick up the weapons that the Iraqi military just drops and runs away. Now they have more guns, more equipment, and we're continuing to arm them, train them, fund them in order to topple Assad. We are the biggest player in this proxy war, and Russia, again, they're not blameless. They're doing the same thing, but it's kind of hard for somebody in a glass house to cast stones. But apparently, Obama has absolutely no problem throwing the first throw here. Here's Obama at the UN, his speech. I'll play just a little bit of this. I'm not going to torture you guys with a whole bunch of Obama, but I find this to be particularly interesting. Here's the clip.
In order to move forward, though, we do have to acknowledge that the existing path to global integration requires a course correction. Because too often those trumpeting the benefits of globalization have ignored inequality within and among nations.
All right, so he's talking about inequality within and among nations. Again, I do believe that the whole climate change agenda is a redistribution of wealth plan to other countries. And the kind of globalization that Obama wants is the kind where our sovereignty is now superseded by a global bureaucracy, a global initiative, the United Nations. Obama continues to tell us that we should be subjected to international laws. Again, we don't have the ability to elect the people at the United Nations. We are unable to affect change within this body, within this bureaucracy, and yet we should be subjected to their whims. No. But Obama continues. He's talking about globalization.
Have ignored the enduring appeal of ethnic and sectarian identities. Have left international institutions ill-equipped, underfunded, under-resourced in order to handle transnational challenges. And as these real problems have been neglected, alternative visions of the world have pressed forward.
So now he's starting to talk about the rise of neo-fascism. We see that with the mass migration into Europe, and populism and nationalism. He's starting to dig into that.
In the wealthiest countries and in the poorest, religious fundamentalism, the politics of ethnicity or tribe or sect, aggressive nationalism, a crude populism, sometimes from the far left, but more often from the far right, which seeks to restore what they believe was a better, simpler age free of outside contamination. We cannot dismiss these visions.
Look, this is actually one aspect that I can actually agree with Obama in that we can't dismiss that. There is within the alt-right, there is a element that is actually very racist, very white supremacist, and they do look at the world in these nationalist kind of contexts. I'm not calling all Donald Trump supporters, by the way, alt-right. I'm not calling them all racist, but let's point out that everyone who is alt-right and racist is voting for Donald Trump. So I will say this is one of the very few times that I will agree with him, Obama, talking about something that we should be paying attention to. But again, I think he's completely disingenuous in this. I don't think he really cares to warn us of the dangers of that. I think he's just trying to get Hillary elected and another jab at Donald Trump.
They are powerful. They reflect dissatisfaction among too many of our citizens. I do not believe those visions can deliver security or prosperity over the long term. But I do believe that these visions fail to recognize at a very basic level our common humanity. Moreover, I believe that the acceleration of travel and technology and telecommunications, together with a global economy that depends on a global supply chains, makes it self-defeating ultimately for those who seek to reverse this progress.
Okay, so this is the conversation that I frequently have with Mark on the show here, talking about how we intertwine our economies. It does create a sort of deterrent effect from hostility and aggression against each other. Obama wants to continue to intertwine our economies to the point of dependence, and there is a point here that needs to be made. There's a difference between free trade and allowing yourself to engage in trade for things that you need and want, and there's also a difference between forcing yourself to not be able to produce anything like we're doing here in America. We regulate the crap out of our own industry. We essentially have, we're pulling back the reins on industry when we could be unleashing them, creating jobs, unleashing human incentive, and we could be providing so much more on the world market than we are now. We're consuming so much and not producing as much as we ought to be. But there's a difference between intertwining your economies through free trade and stopping yourself from being able to produce and becoming dependent on other countries. I caution about the dependency, especially when we are in bed with countries like, for example, Turkey, like, for example, Saudi Arabia. These are the issues, and it's what continues to bring us into the Middle East in fighting these foreign conflicts. Again, energy independence will make it so we don't need those areas, and we won't need to be the stabilizing hand, and we don't need to have a U.S. force projection overseas continuing to promote U.S. hegemony. We don't need this if we are not dependent. All I'm saying is that we take personal responsibility for ourselves. We find the balance between globalism and nationalism, and in the middle, there's a place where we are independent. We are sovereign individuals. We're a sovereign nation with our own laws, and we're not having outside nations dictate what we can do, what our freedoms are in our own country, which, by the way, we're the exception to the rule when it comes to freedom. It's different than becoming dependent, and it's different than becoming isolationist. We need to find that middle ground, and that's really what we need to keep in mind, is that there is a middle ground, and really it's a free market. That's what it is. So while Obama's up there talking about how we need to be more restrained by international communities, more subjected to international law, we have Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talking to the United Nations, and he's giving the exact opposite message. Here it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates from so many lands, I have one message for you today. Lay down your arms. The war against Israel at the UN is over. Perhaps some of you don't know it yet, but I'm confident that one day, in the not too distant future, you will also get the message from your president or from your prime minister informing you that the war against Israel at the United Nations has ended. Yes, I know. There might be a storm before the calm. I know there's talk about ganging up on Israel at the UN later this year. Given its history of hostility towards the UN, or towards Israel rather, does anyone really believe that Israel will let the UN determine our security and our vital national interests? We will not accept any attempt by the UN to dictate terms to Israel. The road to peace runs through Jerusalem and Ramallah, not through New York. But regardless of what happens in the months ahead, I have total confidence that in the years ahead, the revolution in Israel's standing among the nations will finally penetrate this hall of nations. I have so much confidence, in fact, that I predict that a decade from now, an Israeli prime minister will stand right here where I'm standing and actually applaud the UN. But I want to ask you, why do we have to wait a decade? Why keep vilifying Israel? Perhaps because some of you don't appreciate that the obsessive bias against Israel is not just a problem for my country, it's a problem for your countries too. Because if the UN spends so much time condemning the only liberal democracy in the Middle East, it has far less time to address war, disease, poverty, climate change, and all the other serious problems that plague the planet.
Okay, so other than the climate change thing, he's up there talking about sovereignty and how he's not going to be, he doesn't want Israel to be subjected to an international body. This is the exact opposite message that we're getting from Obama. But I digress. We are out of time for today. I really appreciate you all tuning into the program. MacPack, you are the tip of the spear, and thank you so much for tuning in week after week. Your continued support is appreciated. We don't have time to talk about Ted Cruz's endorsement of Donald Trump. I will get to that next week, as well as defining conservatarianism. I want to talk about that. I want to actually, really put some teeth behind what that is. Let's define it. Let's call it what it is. I'll tell you what my perception of it is, and let's build this ideology. If this is something that we believe in, which I do, I think we should really try to do this, because conservatives and libertarians are indeed natural allies. But that's all the time we got for today. I really appreciate it again. Thanks so much to Dan Sandini and Mark Delphine for joining us. Don't forget to check us out every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at our website, OnTheMoveShow.com. By the way, while you're there, click the shop link. We got products for sale over there like T-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, and phone cases with liberty-oriented merchandise like I Heart Open Carry and let's see, hashtag Never Trump. Let's see, Bear Arms is the design over there too. Be Libertarian. There's several designs. Check them out. Again, the shop link on OnTheMoveShow.com. Don't forget to follow us on Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. That's SPREAKER.com/OnTheMoveShow. Like us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Follow us on Twitter @OnTheMoveShow. And subscribe to us on YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. Also, big shout out to YouthRevolt.org. Again, YouthRevolt.org for picking us up on their network. Really appreciate that. Check them out, gang. Anyway, as always, know your rights, assert your rights, and get on the move.